Ridiculous. Hey, everyone. Sorry, thought we went live, but we didn't. So let's try this again. From the spooky land near Salem, Mass. to you listening around the world, this, my ghouls and guys, is Spaced Out Saturday. I'm your host and Spaced Out Radio's resident witch, Lynn Wallington, coming to you live from my broomstick. So grab a seat, keep your arms and legs on the brooms at all times. In case of emergency, as you know, there are no oxygen masks or flotation devices, so just hang on tight as we fly into tonight's adventure. We welcome you to tonight's show on YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. If you want to take a listen to the archives, they are free at youtube.com/spacedoutradio. Just do us the favor and hit that subscribe button. You can also follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio and my personal handle at Witchy Linny, Witchy with a Y, Linny with an I-E. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram at Spaced Out Radio Show and at Witchy Linny. Our website is spacedoutradio.com, where we have a plethora of features for you, including rocking out to Bumblefoot. Read up on the SOR Newswire, and so much more. And if you're in the mood for some paranormal stories combined with utter ridiculousness, you can also find me and my friend Caitlin on YouTube at Paranormal Spirits. I put a link in the description down below. And if you enjoy Emily's drinking game on that YouTube channel and want to play here tonight, please feel free to do so. For those of you who aren't familiar, the game is simple. Anytime I screw up a word or phrase, you get to take a drink. It's Saturday night, and here on Spaced Out Saturday, that means it's cocktail time. For tonight's Witch's Brew, I am enjoying a delicious peach rosé. It's really good. I wasn't sure if I was going to like it. So grab yourself a drink, sit back, and let's have a fun night together. Okay, I am calling out to all of my starseeds, contactees, UFO lovers, and any other interested party because we have a great show for you tonight. If you've listened to Dave Scott at all, you already know my guest. Tonight on the show, I have the universally loved Samantha Mowat. From infancy, Samantha Mowat has been watched over by extraterrestrial and multi-dimensional beings. At numerous points in her life, extraterrestrials have intervened by providing healing to her physical form. It was during her teenage years that Samantha began to experience school on craft with the Pleiadians, where they taught her how to access and harness her psychic abilities, as well as share knowledge of future events. It was also at this time that Samantha entered into the hybridization program. Since then, she's met dozens of her hybrid children. Samantha has encountered over 40 different species of extraterrestrial and multidimensional beings, ranging from angelic beings and elementals to the Pleiadians, the Greys, the Reptilians, the Mantis beings, and many more. These encounters, however, have brought about a darker side of contact. As a result of her contact, Samantha has been subjected to encounters with Black Operative, where she experienced intensive training, MK Ultra programming, and interrogation about the beings that were abducting her. But we are going to have a great conversation tonight. So gather with your hybrids, pop some popcorn, get those typing fingers ready for your questions, because I guarantee you this is going to be an incredible show. And speaking of questions, if you have one, please remember to type it in all caps so that I can see them more easily. And welcome to the show, Samantha, again.
Thank you, Lynn. I'm very excited to be here. It'll be entertaining.
Oh, it's already entertaining. But you know what? Maybe it was for the best because I didn't mess up on as many words, which unfortunately for the people playing the drinking game, they didn't get to hear it. So the second time around, I did it much better.
Yeah, you did a beautiful job. I'm thoroughly entertained.
It was ridiculous. So I want to say thank you to, hold on, I'm going to find you. Somebody said, has she started? And I realized I never went live. So sorry, everyone, but glad to see you here. And we are live now. It's very exciting. So Samantha and I have just recently gotten to know each other, and I'm super, super excited. As you can probably tell, I'm like fangirling over Samantha right now. She's awesome.
Both ways.
Yeah.
I love other people who practice magic. So I'm like, yay, this is perfect. Especially once you work with a lot of the like lighter elements of magic, exploring both avenues. I mean, as you know, there's 4 types of magic. And I love the fact that when I was getting the chance to read you and talk to you, I got to see how you have a healthy balance with all of it. And that's incredible. I'm happy to see that.
Oh, good. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
absolutely it needs to be balanced. And you know what we need to
Mm-hmm.
do? I got something going for everybody tonight. I don't know
Oh.
if you guys will be able to see it, but let's see if I can get some smoke going for you. We've got some incense going in the
Mm-hmm.
background. It smells delicious. It's kind of got a cinnamony smell.
Nice.
Um, yes. So
Yeah.
yeah, I love it too. I think there's always that automatic connection with somebody else who practices
Yeah.
magic. It's kind of this little like secret connection.
Well, if it's the same kinds of magic, then yes. 'Cause I mean, I don't know, B, but I've met quite a few magic practitioners. I'm like, whoa, okay, we practice very different types here.
Yes. Yes, that is true. That is true.
Yeah.
And I tend to practice kind of,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say all, but most of them, like I'm not afraid to do some of I hate calling it light and dark because I think magic is neutral, but protective magic, let's just call it that. I don't mind doing that. I know some people don't want to go near that at all, but if there's the need, I'm not going to do it to just, someone that annoyed me on the street.
But if you have to protect kids and stuff like that, then I mean,
Yes.
I can see calling on every single being you work with to come in and protect them. Stuff like that is essential. And then giving a form of energy in exchange is a necessary balance.
Yep, that's absolutely true.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They're still talking about the drinking game. Yes, Kira she's going to be the drinking game master tonight when Lynn messes up on what she says, which will be quite often tonight.
It's part of your charm. We love it. It makes it more entertaining.
Well, if nothing else, I can try to be entertaining. So that's good. G'day, Aussie Steve. I love that he calls me Lynn Supreme Witchy now. It's great. It's awesome. Okay, so let's get started because we've got another witch. We actually have quite a few witches in our audience, so that's awesome. Yay, rooted in sacredness, eclectic witch. I think we all must be a little bit eclectic at this point in time. It's very rare to find someone who like really just goes down one tradition, but I think that's good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Science Bob. Two awesome people. Great show at Base. Science Bob, you're awesome, and I can't wait to talk to you tomorrow night. Mm-hmm. He's the best.
Yeah.
So now you've had a lifetime of experiences. I'm curious, what's the very first encounter that you remember happening, and what was it?
Well, that goes in two areas. My first one with hypnosis, which actually will unlock the memory, was one that was done for me by Johnny Enoch about 2014, 2015, somewhere in there. I think it was 14, if I'm not mistaken. And it happened when I was only a few months old. I saw myself as a baby lying on my parents' bed. My lungs were burning because, of course, it's the 80s. All of our parents smoked in the house and didn't really open windows and stuff like that. So my little body was not having any of it. So I cried out to ETs I work with saying, take me home. I'm done. I'm not enjoying this.
Aww.
I want to leave this contract. You let my brother go home. If he can go home, I can go home because I'm a twin. Aww. And so yeah. And so what happened was I had an Andromedan being come in just out of phase, which is where you know how we're in a universe where there's multiple dimensions and the dimensions are stacked upon one another. So if we're operating here at, like, let's say a level 4 for the fourth dimension, he's operating at level 5, 6. So it's kind of like overlapping, but not quite the same. Yeah. And he's partially in phase so that people that are more clairvoyant can see him, but people who aren't can't as easily. And he was providing healing energy into my body, singing to me a song in Andromedan dialect. Very beautiful, and just taking all the pain and the injury away because I was not a happy baby. And from then they told me they'd keep me safe, they would take care of my health, I didn't have to worry about it. I don't mind people getting hypnosis, to bring out their past experiences. But one thing I do want to warn you about is if you are a contactee, especially someone going through hybridization, you should be very cautious about who you go through hypnosis with. And my reason being is I've gone through hypnotic regression 3 times. And with 2 out of 3, I end up having orchestrated relationships with the people that I had hypnotic regressions with. And it's because our genetics were compatible, but also when you go through hypnosis, it alters your brainwave pattern, also alters your frequency, which can make it so you're more likely to have bonding and pairing going on with somebody. Do you understand what that is? Where it's like pardon me. Thank you. Yeah. Vibrations between the 2 people kind of lining up. So that was the one that I remembered through hypnosis. But the earliest one that I remembered from childhood would be one where I was going through my window when I was about 4, 5 years old, somewhere in there, when I lived in paramilitary quarters when my parents lived just off the base. And it was a gray that was on the side of our house, just kind of like in a frog pose on the side of the exterior part of the building. And I was going through the window and I see this gray and it's locking eyes with me and everything goes black. So there's a lot of memories like that from when I was little, that when you're going through as a kid, you're like, huh, that's weird, but you don't really think a whole lot about it. So
it's interesting. Okay, so Grantavius has a question. Can hypnotic regression implant false memories? Yes.
Undoubtedly. And you have to be careful, because with some hypnotic regressions, especially, like, I'm not someone that has a very good imagination. I actually had to train myself how to do visualizations, because when I was a kid, I didn't have the ability to, like, a lot of kids are very good at like making things up and finding stories like that. And I couldn't do that as a kid. I had to train myself how to visualize. And so when I went through hypnotic regressions, I always asked the beings I work with, angels, ascended masters, everyone that I work with, can you please assist me to only recover accurate memories? And then even when you do see things, you have to trust that internal sense of, does this resonate? Does it not? Does it feel like there's fabrication here? You have to really pay attention to that inner knowing, because we all have beautiful intuitions. And if you're not careful, you could have a person who's leading the hypnotic regression implanting false memories unintentionally, leading you down a rabbit hole that way. Sorry, cat hair on my face.
That's okay. I think Science Bob was the one who said the cat's in charge.
He is.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's very true. I've had 2 regressions done myself, and I also used to do regressions on people because my background is in psychology. And the thing that I realized, and I knew this, but going through it is always very different. That you're very aware still of everything that's going on. It's a very light trance state, and so I would recommend like paying attention to what you're seeing, but also listen to what the therapist or the hypnotic
expressionist,
thank you, is doing to you or is saying to you, you know. And if you feel like they're planting memories, like, are you seeing something here? Like, are you seeing such and such and such? Or they're just being too specific. They should be very vague questions.
I agree. And that's one thing that I wanted to mention, especially if you're someone who's going through like the MyLab program, if you're going through extraterrestrial multidimensional contact, if you are going through the super soldier program or MKUltra or anything like that, do not go get regressed easily. Do not go get regressions done by someone who's not aware of all the triggering that can happen for people that are going through these experiences, because you don't want to trigger something like suicide programming. You don't want to trigger too many memories coming forward at once and having a nervous breakdown, which does happen. I've seen it happen to people and dealt with them in the aftermath because they had a regressionist who did push them too far and had that anxiety come around them afterwards.
Right. Which is why it's very important, I think, too, to make sure that your regressionist does have a background in psychology, because there are emotions, there is trauma that's going to come up, and they know how to handle that in the moment, and to make sure that it doesn't go too far. So it's an interesting, it's a fascinating process. I think it's great.
So good.
Yeah. And thankfully I had this amazing psychologist who was doing mine, because I had no idea what was going to come up and did not expect the secret space program. So that was just like, when I was done, I was like, no.
But because we're on the topic of regressions, for those of you who have gotten hypnotic regressions done, make sure afterwards that you not only audio record in your phone on an audio recording device what you saw and what you experienced, maybe record it while it's happening as well, but start to take note of your dreams afterwards. Because often when we go through hypnotic regression, we unlock that pathway to these memories, and then they start coming forward in our dream time. So very interesting.
Yes. Donna wants to know, is it okay if the regressionist asks you to talk to a being one encounters during a regression?
It depends on the being. Sorry. The reason being, Donna, is if you're looking at the aspect of this, if I'm looking at one of my experiences, for instance, the experience where I was raped by some reptilians, if my regressionist tries to find out, like, pardon me one second, guys, what am I trying to say? Okay. If my regressionist wants, for my healing's sake in a normal world, to talk to that being who sexually assaulted me, to try to find out what the reasoning was, is there a soul contract here? Is this something that was meant to happen? That can actually open up a negative channel between myself and them, where they can then come back to further abduct and torment you, which you don't want. Whereas in situations, if you're trying to deal with your soul family, your star family, beings that you've known from other lifetimes that are on a positive level, yes, that's beautiful. You should totally go ahead and allow that to happen. But talk to them beforehand about what you are and are not willing to go into. That way you keep yourself safe.
Yeah, for sure. Let's see. Angels for Our Life says, Samantha, I've asked ETs who've been abducting me. There you go, guys. There's a drink. Made agreements with them, all for seeing and spending time with my hybrid children. They've denied access and even broke what I thought were agreements. So I'm not sure if that's a question so much as a statement.
Well, part of the reason why they might break that aspect of not allowing you to continue seeing your hybrid children is it depends upon a couple of different things. Did you have the contract in place just to make the hybrid children? Are they allowed to have interactions with you outside of the production of the hybrid children, or is it violating any galactic laws, any soul contract or soul growth in place? That can be part of where it's a little more difficult. If you do want to see your hybrid children, you can actually ask them to start coming to talk to you telepathically. You can ask them to start showing up in your astral projections, because the astral form is very different than the physical form. And so you can ask your hybrid children by focusing and going into a deep meditation, focusing on your heart, focusing to the hybrid children, saying them telepathic messages of, I love you, I want to meet you, I want to have experiences with you, please come see me. And a lot of them will do it. But you do have to do this consistently. It might take you 6 months of asking every day for them to realize, oh my goodness, they're not going to give up. Okay, let's just go see mom for a bit. So.
Yes. Yeah. And I have done that. It does work, actually.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I forgot about, so Samantha and we talked about this during the intro that you didn't hear. But Samantha and I had a great conversation yesterday. We were chatting for like 2 hours. I was, asking her question after question after question. And she was so kind. I know you're not doing them right now, and I really appreciated Samantha did a reading for me, which was incredible, but also consisted of me like, well, what about this? Do you know about this? Can you ask me this? Can you tell me what this is? How do I do that? Question after question. So she was very sweet and humored me the entire time. But you did mention hybrid children at one point, but it was very, very slight, and I had almost forgotten about it, which is crazy. Like, how could I forget about that? But until you said that, then I was just kind of, oh yeah. But yeah, it was an astral forum that I met them.
Yeah.
So
very common. Most people, to be honest with you, most people would be a little bit freaked out if they do see their hybrid children either coming in through their house or see them standing by their bedside table or become fully conscious on craft and they're giving birth to a hybrid child, or with their hybridization partner or their primary, as I like to call them, person you're primarily being bred with at a certain period of time, both you having different components of ET DNA being there while you're either conceiving the child and then seeing them afterwards. Because a lot of people that do make hybrids get the opportunity to meet them, they just might not remember them. So for those of you who know that you have made the hybrid children, it would be worth in that situation considering going to someone like a regressionist to get those memories to come forward to have further elaboration upon the event itself.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I didn't even know that that had happened. I had no memory of it whatsoever and wasn't expecting it. But yeah, it was interesting. They were hybrid reptilian children, and they were actually really cute. Oh, they were so cute.
What color are your reptilian hybrid babies? Mine are black.
One was green and the other was tan. Ooh. They're so cute.
I met both of those races. Okay, we're going to have to exchange drawings and see what they look like.
Yes. Okay. I have them somewhere. I'll have to find them. But I'm not as good at you as writing everything down. But that was my homework, so I'm going to do it.
Yay, love it.
Oh, okay. So we have a ton of questions. And sorry, guys, I could chat with Samantha all night. But I want you to be able to, too. So M says, I don't understand my labs. Wouldn't experiencers discuss their experiences openly if asked nicely?
But that's also the thing you have to take into consideration. These are very private and intense experiences for a lot of my labs. And my lab is a legitimate alien extraterrestrial contactee who's also being abducted by the military as well. For a lot of people, if they're from a religious family, if they're from a more conservative family or a family that isn't as open as mine, they may be subject to ridicule, possibly being disowned by the family. They can have things such as disownment going on from their friends, their community. If they go to church, they might be concerned about people that go to church will now think of them. Their spouses may leave them. Their spouses may even take their children away, being like, well, I don't remember this. I don't go through this. How can you be going through this? Not realizing that just because one spouse is having it doesn't mean the other one is. Not all my labs have a relationship together. Quite often, yes, but not always the case. And so there is a lot of concern for a lot of these people to share that information. It is just as delicate and personal for a lot of people who are contactees, my labs and such forth, to share these intimate personal details with others as it would be to discuss your sex life with people openly. It's quite personal.
Yes, for sure. For sure. Let's see. So I asked
Yeah.
Grantavius to specify, because I wasn't sure if he meant by they, if he meant like the government or the ET. So let's wait and see if we get an answer for that. But this one was an interesting question as well that Jennifer had. Samantha, I saw a gray shark-skinned being that looked like a lion without ears in a dream. It spoke by spelling words out in succession, like AT as in AT as in at, I think. In a dream, have you heard of such a being?
No, I haven't seen any Lyrans that were without the normal fur type appearance and being covered in gray skin. That sounds like a variety of hybrid. You have to remember there's just as much diversity in the universe as we see on the planet Earth. There's the percentage, like size-wise, of our planet is very small, yet we still have a tremendous amount of life here. And it's the same thing can be said for the universe. There's crossbreeding going on by multiple different species over millions of years now. And so no single person on this planet will have a true catalog of everything you're likely to encounter within this universe alone. When you ask Grantavius about blocking, the government can block your regressions from actually coming forward by doing layers of memories, as can the extraterrestrials and multidimensionals. So what the extraterrestrials and multidimensionals would do is they do screen memories over top of the memory. So let's say, Grantavius, I were to be an ET and I'm abducting you and I'm putting you through the hybridization program. So what I would do is I would put the screen memory that I often see with a very good friend of mine, where rather than showing you that you're going onto a craft, I'm going to show you going to a friend's house and we're going to a party. And look, there's men and there's women here. And oh, interesting, they're all around your age and you find them all kind of attractive. Okay. And in order to actually make it so that your sperm is more viable, well, guess what? Here, drink this. I'm going to give you a drink. And you're thinking, oh man, there's something wrong with that rum and coke you gave me. It's kind of like chalky or like has this weird graininess. And they're like, oh, it's okay. Just drink it really fast. You won't mind. Take a shot for me. And you're like, okay, I'm at a party. I'll do this. And then you'll go and have sex with someone. And you'll find, like, when you wake up, it's like, oh, it's so weird. I feel like I'm hungover. I feel like I'm kind of like still have this graininess in my throat. But they'll make it so it's layers of memories on top. So you'll see it as people that you possibly went to high school with or people that you went to college with, not realizing that there are other humans in the room, which they actually are, with ETs bringing you in and the sexual aspect actually being other people on craft. There's a lot of memories in play. Whereas with the government, it's a little bit different. They try to actually take our memories away. They will sometimes try to mimic ET craft, or they'll try to make it so it's a completely obscure looking scenario where you'll think, okay, well, I'm in a city that doesn't make sense because I haven't been to this type of city and it doesn't really have a normal sky. It seems like it's underground, so this must be a dream, not realizing if you aren't aware of things like deep underground military bases or DUMBs, then you'll kind of dismiss some of it because you'll feel like it's not an organic city like we have up here with the bird life as much or the natural plants, so on and so forth. And so they do a lot more technological influence, whereas the extraterrestrials and multidimensionals use more of the telepathic and psychic influence to put the mind blocks in place for preventing memories coming to the surface.
Yeah. I have a question. So with the government, when they're trying to erase memories with the technology that they use, are there any long-term effects on those of us who have had that done to us?
Oh God, yes. We're much more prone to Alzheimer's, dementia, more prone to psychotic breakdowns, we're more prone to violence, alcohol, and drug addiction. They also sometimes use, I should have mentioned this earlier, they do work with some extraterrestrials and multidimensionals because some of the ETs do actually have contracts with their governments and they don't necessarily care about us. Not all of them, mind you, but some varieties of Greys, some varieties of Reptilian work with them as well, and some varieties of Mantis. Now, I have met lovely beings from all three of those previously. Some of my favorite beings actually come from those species, but unfortunately some of them do work with them, and they will work with the military to put these artificially implanted memories in. And quite often you'll reach a block where you'll have like a section of a dream that keeps reoccurring over and over, and you'll see like the same portion of it, and you'll reach like a door or an event that you just can't seem to get past. And it's kind of confusing for people, so wonder, why do I keep having the same reoccurring dream? But it's your mind trying to unlock the information, have it come forward.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Kim says, maybe a dumb question, but where does Samantha get her information? Not a dumb question at all.
No. Most of my information comes from my experiences. So virtually everything I talk about is from my place of awareness, as well as the multidimensional and extraterrestrial beings that I work with. I am a clairvoyant psychic, which means the majority of my information comes through visually, as well as a claircognizant, which you are as well. So get the download information quite often. That's why sometimes you'll hear me speak and I'll go from like one way of being into being a totally different way. It's when you start channeling. Very fun, very easy.
Yes. Yeah. And apparently I have that in my future. I'm very excited.
Definitely more on the claircognizance, and you'll love it. It's going to become so much easier for you, that you're learning how to trust that more, which it does take practice. It's a lot of fun though.
I just used it in school for most of for the most part. So I did well with tests. Everybody thought I was really smart. I'm like, not really. All the information just kind of pops in my head.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
I totally get that one. But Kim, a lot of the beings I work with, if I'm on craft and I ask them a question, normally they will answer it. Sometimes I will be in my reading room like I am right now, and I'll be meditating awesome, like, hey guys, can you please explain this to me or that to me? And normally they'll energetically come into the space, which is where they're partially transparent or see-through, and then we'll have a telepathic discussion going on about things in regards to what I'm curious about. They come in at their own discretion. They don't always come in when I want them to. So it's a little bit frustrating. I can't get information from everything because there are certain things they're not even willing to talk to me about, because either I won't understand from my level of awareness, or it's not relevant for me, or it's bad for me to know.
Definitely. Spanish Fly says, do children have more connection to entities than adults?
No. Actually, we all have about the same level of capability when it comes to connecting to things. Children are much more psychic on average than the average adult, but that's because they're not as programmed through our media, our lifestyle, our societal pressures, so on and so forth. Children also are less prone to have energetic attachments than adults, because as many of us age from the time we reach teenagehood, a lot of us start collecting onto these entities into the outside of our aura, and then we start having these entities start to play into our auric field, leading us towards bad behaviors, drug, alcohol addictions, social media addictions, sex addictions, things of that nature, or even splurging with finances, or even mental manipulation, narcissistic tendencies. So depending upon entities is a very broad term. That'd be like asking something like, you have to look at the aspect of entities when people think that technically fairies and angels could be considered entities. Technically dead people could be considered entities. Same thing with reptilians, greys, and any being that we work with that isn't in this dimensional universe would be considered an entity. So it's a little challenging to fully explain that one accurately.
Yes.
Yeah.
Science Bob, is that a dig at me? You need a capable brain to process and use the download. That's hilarious. All right, Solar Warden says, hey, Lynn and Samantha. Hey, Solar Warden. Sam, what is your opinion / thoughts on remote viewing?
Remote viewing can be highly accurate. Anyone can learn how to remote view. It's an aspect of clairvoyance that we all do. Now, when you look at remote viewing, I want you to think of it a little differently than how you've thought of it in the past. When you look at a memory or an event of a situation that you've gone through, whether it's your high school graduation, your wedding, the birth of your child, your first kiss, whatever it is, when you look back on that memory, many of you will see it from an outside perspective looking in on the event, and that is a form of remote viewing. And when we're looking at other aspects of remote viewing, like the more commonly used one, where people are viewing a object, a location, or a person or people, that is a very real aspect and capability. It is something you can learn how to do, but for most people, where they struggle with it is they don't trust the information they're receiving. That is the one thing I've found within myself when it comes to remote viewing some of the situations in my life. But you could have spontaneous remote viewing as well. Remote viewing, for instance, for people who are contactees, I have a lot of spontaneous remote viewing that happens with my primary breeding partner, where I will suddenly get flashes and these images that'll come forward to my eyes, my physical eyes, where I'll see him doing things, whether it's like making dinner or him talking to his cat or stuff like that. And it sounds so random, but you can also have remote viewing situations where you suddenly see ETs on craft, or you'll see where craft are located. It's much different than what people think. Sometimes you'll see the person by themselves, where it's like your entire vision goes black except for the person and their actions. And other times you'll see the things that are all around them as well. It doesn't seem to have necessary rhyme or reason in my experience as to how mine happens, but that could be because of the clairvoyant component as well. The two abilities kind of trying to have control over one another.
Gotcha. Now I have a question. So what is the difference between remote viewing and astral projection?
Oh, that's easy. So remote viewing is your consciousness in your awake state, projecting out of your body in a visual component to see what's going on. With astral projection, you're putting your body into an aspect of being asleep. The body's asleep and laying down, deeper than meditation, and then you're rising up out of your body with your consciousness and going from right here to wherever you want to go. So you would typically, when you're astral projecting, be able to see yourself leaving your body, coming out of your house, floating out of the room. Whereas remote viewing, it's spontaneous. You could be from like, I could be going to do a remote viewing session to see what you're doing, and I would close my eyes and get into a relaxed state, and then I'd suddenly pop in my consciousness into your space, with it being more instantaneous.
Gotcha. So, okay. So now when I have done astral projection, because I have done it quite a bit, to me, it was very, like we talked about yesterday, third eye visions, as opposed to seeming like I was out in the room. It was definitely kind of this whole, I definitely felt slightly above my body. I didn't feel like I was grounded completely, but it was more of a, I don't even know what you would call it. The only word that pops into my head is vision quest. It was similar to that, where it was something that I saw with my third eye versus actually looking around and seeing.
That makes sense, actually. That's pretty normal. Unfortunately, for most people, when they're having these third eye visions come in with information, it will be very subtle at first until you learn how to train your third eye to make the image clarity have more sharpness to it, more depth of color, more of the 3D aspect. It does take practice, but it's well worth the practice. I promise you, it'll make the world a difference with the information you're able to receive.
Yeah. All right, cool. Thank you. Em wants to know, can Samantha ever take photos of these ETs or their crafts?
I can ask, but I don't seem to have any luck when it comes to remembering to ever take my camera out. This sounds really bad, but I'm not very good at remembering to take photos of my craft or my kids or anything. And when you go on to Craft M, one thing you need to understand is you will not be given the option to grab your cell phone. You will not be given the chance to grab your Nikon or other camera. You really won't. You'll be going typically in whatever state you're in. They will not normally even take anything with you. It'll be going either through a vortex, an orb. Sometimes you'll walk out of your house and walk out into a craft. That does happen as well. But the beings you're with, if you were to take these things with you, such as your cell phone, or you were to take a craft, the camera onto the craft, they would permit you to take photos. They would not allow for you to do so. And if you did manage to take a photo or to steal something off of a craft, they would never abduct you again. Those beings would actually tell all the beings that they work with that you could not be trusted because it is violating an act of privacy with them. A lot of the beings that do come to have contact with us on a multidimensional and physical capacity do not necessarily have the allowance to enable us to take these photos and take souvenirs. And the reason being is disclosure has to happen on a human level down here in a certain way and at a certain time. And if we were to start something having every human who's being abducted by whatever species it is, Lyran, Pleiadian, Reptilian, Grey, whatever, being able to take photos, that would actually send most people into a panic because they wouldn't be able to handle it. They'd see the pictures, they'd misinterpret it, they would skew it. And that's part of what the ETs are worried about is they don't want to have this calamity happen as the people start to see what they look like. It'll be done in phases and sections. It won't be all thousands of being species coming forward at once. We're like, oh God, there's all these different species and this is what they look like. They're not going to let that happen. They'll choose ones that are closer in appearance to us first to get us acclimatized, the same way you get a child acclimatized to going out in the winter. Maybe like, okay, we're born this summer and we're gonna wear, a light jacket now, and then we'll wear mittens later, and then we'll wear a heavy jacket and gloves. It goes in these increments, same thing. So.
Now I know I've heard you say on other shows that there is a species of Lyran beings that look human. What other species look human?
Oh, there's so many different species that look human. We have humans that are on Venetians. The Pleiadians look human, but they're similar in DNA and structure to us. We could breed with them, but they're slightly different. Then you have the Aldebarans. They also look human. There are so many species that are very similar to human in appearance to us, but they're not quite the same as ourselves because we have a lot more activated DNA of other ET species in us. We're actually more of a melting pot in the same way that Canada and US are very... we're all mutts is a nice way to put it. Or there's no nice way to put that.
Yeah, no.
Whereas people from some of the old countries, they could be like, okay, well, all of my family is just Ethiopian or English or whatever. And that's not the case here. We're very diverse that way. And so we can breed with them, yes, but it doesn't necessarily come without health problems for them. So a lot of the other human races don't actually want to breed with us. There's a lot of the other species that have an interest in our diverse DNA that we have that are more interested in breeding with us.
Interesting. Yeah. That is fascinating.
It is.
I don't want to forget this because I've been waiting to ask you this one. This is going back to erasing memories. If they have to erase memories, doesn't that tell you that the overall agenda isn't good for humanity?
I love that question, but I want you to take this into consideration. Many of the people on this planet are what's known as starseeds. They are actually extraterrestrial multidimensional beings that have incarnated down onto the planet Earth who need to live a certain degree of normality within their Earth lifetimes, even though their souls are, for instance, like let's say you're a cat lion being and you're coming down to Earth because you're here to help with the oceans and you're here to help with the water. And I will have me and the other ETs that we work with are going to abduct you from the time you're born until you die to make sure that your body is healthy, to make sure that it's kind of like having a boots on the ground perspective where we can find out, okay, we notice that the humans overall have this kind of auric projection going on. We've noticed that there's an increasing amount of stress cortisol going on. We've noticed that these humans are holding on to these vibrations now, and that we're noticing that between the time that Samantha was 4 versus her at 34, we've noticed there's actually a huge drop in the amount of birds there are now and a big drop in the amount of insects, because we've noticed that with her memories and things that we view from her eyes and the other psychic senses, that we've noticed a 34% drop in the amount of birds. And you'd be like, well, why is that relevant? Why would they care about that? Well, a lot of these beings actually care a lot about the ecology of Earth. They care about the flora and the fauna. They have a strong investment towards the animals on this planet, and they have a strong connection towards the planet itself because they do view Earth as being a natural, it's not really natural, but it's this location that was chosen to be this melting pot, very similar to a zoo, where we have all sorts of species, both plant and animal, from all over the universe that have been brought together as a form of peaceful library, so to speak. And we have been, in essence, destroying that, which we think, okay, well, that just screws us over and we'll have nowhere to live and our animals will be dead. And how's that their problem? Well, actually, the vibration really throws off the universe in like our immediate solar system area when we do things like that, because the Earth has a vibration of frequency, a heartbeat, so to speak.
Yeah.
And because we're actually throwing that vibrational frequency off, it's creating discord in the planets around us and the solar systems around us as well. And that's part of where their concern is coming in. So we look at that going, well, how does this relate to the abduction component, Samantha? Why wouldn't they allow you to remember this then? Well, think it this way. If they allowed for every single person who is being abducted to maintain their memories from the time they're born until the time they died, we would actually have a very difficult time having a normal Earth human experience. Even with myself, I had to tell my children before I went to kindergarten, hey guys, I know we're at school, it's so exciting, but we can't talk about aliens, and we have to draw things other than UFOs, and we can't talk about our abductions or special friends that come at night or stuff like that, because your friends are going to think you're weird and your teachers are going to ask a lot of questions. And they did still talk about a little bit, and we did have to talk about a couple like not pack meetings but parent teacher meetings.
Yeah.
But for the most part, not every family is that understanding and not every school is as accepting as my children's school. And so your child, if they were to be going through that situation and they were to remember all their memories to such a strong extent and to be sharing that with others, they could be put on medication, which could take them off their life's purpose. It could shut off their psychic abilities. It can make them more suicidal. It can make them feel like they're completely alone and unable to handle their life. So there are a lot of reasons why these beings do take away the majority of the memories until you reach an awakening point, which many of us have been going through for the last 10, 20 years, is we hit these points where like, I can't do it anymore. Everything seems to not make sense. Why am I living like this way? And we all go through the dark night of the soul, which then facilitates our awakening process. And for a lot of us, it happens our 20s and onwards or 30s and onwards. It really depends on the person and when their agreed upon wake up time is. So they do have kind reasons in mind for not allowing you to remember it. As well, if you're being abducted by some of these beings, it can be rather intimidating, which you might not be afraid of when you're on craft. But if you have memories where you have these 7 feet tall, very large, like a football player, reptilians that are abducting you, and like last night, I had 6 or 8 reptilians that were all black, very big, very beautiful, very similar in appearance to one of the men, like the male reptilians that I have hybrid children with, but these guys had different shaped heads. Their heads were a little more square, a little more bulky muscle wise. And having them being around me in a half circle could be very intimidating for most people if they remember that. And if that's the aspect of your memories that you have coming forward, then if you're not at that state where you can understand that, okay, I energetically have felt that they didn't mean me any harm. I know that they were just trying to talk to me about something and they were frustrated with something I was doing, and trying to be concise and to the point without me doing my usual, sometimes throwing a hissy fit, because I have done that. I know it sounds so immature, but it's reality.
You're allowed. You're allowed. With all these ETs coming to visit you, come on. It's like a bed and breakfast.
Well, I want someone to bring me breakfast in bed.
Yeah, right? Least they could do is bring you some food. Jeez.
Yeah, but if you look at that aspect, like let's say for any of your audience members who aren't remembered they're having contact, but they could still be having the same amount of contact I'm having. But if their first contact memory is seeing 6 reptilian males that are a 1.5 feet taller than twice their weight, staring at them with them in a room, around them in a half circle, that could be very intimidating for most people. And you could misinterpret that. And so I can see where these beings are coming from when they're taking away a lot of the memories from people and trying to make it more gradual. Do you understand?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. I'm a weirdo. I love the reptilians. I've had great experiences with mine. They've been wonderful. But
Yeah.
I've always loved, you know what it is? I loved dinosaurs when I was little. I wanted to be a paleontologist. I was like a 5-year-old who
Could
wanted to be a
see that.
paleontologist. Yeah.
You would totally rock that.
My room was covered in dinosaurs. So, I mean, it's kind of
My
like
sister
living out that childhood fantasy. Yeah.
see that. And I was kind of the opposite way. Like I wasn't really into dinosaurs. I didn't see Jurassic Park until way later than other people. And the first time I saw it, I was actually really freaked out because I've been seeing velociraptors for my MyLabs encounters, and it really actually kind of scared me.
Yeah.
But I love how, as the reptilians have really developed more of a relationship with me, how they've actually gone other way for the most part to be very kind and understanding. So I really appreciate that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I totally understand what you're talking about with the children as well. I had that same kind of experience, especially with my youngest. She was the one that seemed to have memories, and they were very, very vivid.
Yeah.
So we had to have that same conversation. Like, we don't necessarily want to talk about this to people at school, and they're not going to understand. But she had Mary Rodwell to talk to. So she and Mary had hour-long conversations. Yeah, it was great.
I love that.
Yeah. Samantha and I discovered yesterday that we're both in the same book.
We are. Makes it easier because I'm like, yay, I finally meet someone else in there. That's great.
I know, me too. Yeah, I haven't met anybody else that's in there. So it's very exciting. You're so funny too. Like, what chapter are you?
I know. I've got it literally on the table right here. I'm like, I'm going to read it and kind of find out more about your family.
Chapter 5.
I'm excited. Oh, it's Mary Rodwell's.
Oh, yes. It is a great book.
New Human.
It's a wonderful book. If you guys haven't read it.
Oh, good.
Absolutely. I recommend it. Mary is.
I love her.
She is brilliant. She is brilliant. Like, not enough people know about Mary Rodwell. She is incredible. Incredible. Yeah. I was so honored to be able to work with her when I worked at Free. We helped develop the support program together. Yeah. And I just love Mary. Like, I want to hug her and I love Mary so much. She's awesome.
I was so happy to meet her a couple of years. I'm like, yay, perfect. This works out well.
Yeah. She is awesome. Okay.
I agree.
I have missed a bunch of questions. So let me see. Let's see. Okay. This is an interesting one. Angels wants to know what race of ET are shapeshifters, shifting from their natural appearance into human.
That's a complicated one because when people think of shape-shifting, they think of, okay, I'm going to see a complete pixelation change of okay, I'm going to see Samantha's eyes go to being much larger and suddenly being black. And some of them can. But for the most part, ETs will actually project the image from their mind into your mind, seeing a human or seeing something like a deer or an owl. And so one thing I know for certain are shapeshifters is I know a lot of the Arcturians and Andromedans can shapeshift. Now, there's actually a lot of species from Andromeda. So I'm not talking about the Andromedans that are the blue-skinned Andromedans. I'm talking about the ones that are brown-skinned Andromedans. They are very capable. They look almost like a variety of gray, but this beautiful muddy brown skin, so capable of this. And I've seen them shapeshift. I've also seen Arcturians shapeshift when one of them came and sat on my bed and told me I had to start doing my life's purpose, and I couldn't just stick with psychic stuff anymore, and I couldn't ignore the ET stuff, and I really didn't want to. He shapeshifted in front of me. People think the reptilians can shapeshift, and I haven't actually seen them shapeshift. I've seen them project the image of humans in front of them, and that's what they were doing yesterday. Is they were projecting this really ridiculous, almost too generic looking of human faces and chests, but them from the belly button down was reptilian. You're not fooling anyone. Come on. So I know with them,
the bottom half is showing. I see who you are.
I know. But most humans, when we look at people, we look at the upper half. We don't actually think to look at the bottom. And even one thing that I've found with this in regards to shape-shifting component is a lot of them prefer to actually project just the image into your mind. I didn't notice that with the Pleiadians don't do any shape-shifting from my experience. I haven't noticed it with the Mantis beings. Mantises prefer to project as well. And I find the ones that are more psychically capable do seem to do more of the projection rather than the actual shape-shifting, because shape-shifting itself does require a lot of energy, and it is very exhausting, not existing. When I did go on craft a few times, especially when I have them with the Andromedan type beings, I have shapeshifted out of this body into that form before. And that does seem more capable for people when we do go on craft. Sometimes you will actually step out of this body, have this body go into the corner type thing, and you will go step into an ET body. That's completely different. I've done that with the Greys quite a few times. Whereas in other cases, sometimes you'll actually have your entire form switch over. And for me, that actually feels very warm sometimes. It can feel almost like your entire cellular structure is kind of twisting inside out and make it almost like you're completely shifting. You'll feel like your human body will not feel comfortable after that. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, that's interesting. Wow.
Yeah, a little different.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to have that experience. I think that's insane, but like insane in a great way, not insane in a crazy way. But no, I mean, it's that is crazy. That is just like, wow, I can't even imagine what that would be like, but I would love to experience it. So it wasn't, so I love the idea, like you said, of, you know, leaving kind of your body in the corner and stepping into another body. So is it just your soul or whatever you would call it, your astral body, or?
Yeah. Well, normally it's done in a physical encounter, not an astral encounter. Because if you go in your astral form, you don't need to actually change out of one body into another. You could just naturally shapeshift easily in the astral. You can change your hair color, eye color. Most magic practitioners who do end up doing a lot of astral travel, I change my energetic signature when I go into the astral. I have to change my hair color, eye color, my appearance, especially if I'm trying to go to certain locations. I will change a lot of things about me to make me harder to find. It's almost like your energetic imprint has to be shifted.
Yeah.
And so that's where it's a little bit different. Whereas when we're talking about the aspect of switching into the going up on craft and have yourself physically shapeshift out of one body into the other, it's because we do contain enough of that DNA to be able to move into that form. You can't just go like, oh, I feel like shapeshifting to a reptilian, but I have no reptilian DNA. That won't work. You have to have certain percentages in place to be able to shift in that way.
Wow. Okay. That is interesting. Oh, all right. Grantavius wants to know, by DNA, do you think other star systems have intelligent beings that share ours as well?
Very much so. Our DNA is something that is quite well sought after, because we do have a large percentage of multiple ET DNAs contained within ours. And so DNA is actually one of the currencies of the universe. One of the things that I have noticed is that quite often when you will go on to craft, a lot of the beings do end up taking blood samples from you. Sometimes they will collect blood, sometimes they'll collect your urine, sometimes they'll collect a lot of things. And it's because all of these different bodily fluids do contain energy and vibration. And of course, your vibration is a form of currency. They don't have money like how we do, but when you have something's genetic composition, you can better use it for hybridization. You can better use it for shifting the way plants are growing. You can use it for forming psychic bonds with people or situations or the experiences that someone had. You can better astral, like for instance, it's a form of blood magic.
Yeah.
If I have your blood from your menstrual cycle, or I have your urine, or I have blood from your arm, I am better able to trace into the events and the situations that you've gone through, the people that you've had contact with, or the ETs you've had contact with, by following the vibration in that blood. And so a lot of them do use it as a form of connecting in. They can also use it for better understanding the level of toxins going on the planet. But when we're looking at this, they do also take that genetic material and use it for their own hybridization programs off this planet. There are a lot of humans throughout the universe. People think that we're the only ones who are even like us, but there's actually quite a few other planets that have humans that are very similar in capabilities and physical appearance to us, that were seeded onto other planets that are the same stock we are, with very similar combinations of extraterrestrial multidimensional DNA.
So is our kind of form, even though maybe slightly different, is that like really common throughout the universe? Is there any one form that happens more often than others, let's say?
Well, The most common form that I've noticed is a lot of the beings do seem to have 2 legs, 2 arms, 1 hand, or 1 head, pardon me,
Mhm.
and multiple fingers. That seems to be the most common one. They don't necessarily have breasts like how we do. They don't
Mhm.
necessarily have a bum like how we do, or wide hips like we do. That does seem to be more humanly focused. But when you look at a lot of the ETs that we've had contact with, whether it's myself or the other contactees, there does seem to be a very common base shape. Everything from the Arcturians, Andromedans, going over to the Procyons, going over to those from um, almost every single star system you can see, except for things, even like some of the mantis beings do have similar forms to us. Some do look more insectoid, mind you, but
Yeah.
there's quite a few varieties that do seem to have more of that upper body form like we do as well. So
Yeah.
it's very, I think it's just a very easy shape for this universal consciousness to come in.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Speaking of mantis beings, there's a
Yeah.
drawing of my mantis being in the book. Just
Ooh,
FYI, it's
I'm
in there
excited.
with 2 little grays peeking up.
I love
They were
that's so
so
fun.
cute. They were okay. So I have only had, I think, one other person that has
Mhm.
encountered this as well. They were small grays.
Mhm.
I don't know if they were children or if they just had a very childlike
Mhm.
um like
Energy.
energy. Yeah, because they it was almost like they were just curious and like peeking up over, like, because I was on this table and they were just like peeking up over, like, what's going on? Like, they weren't scary. I almost wanted to be like, oh my god, you guys are so cute.
Yeah. But that makes sense, especially if you are someone who, of course you are though, who isn't going to hurt the ETs that you're encountering, who isn't going to mean them any harm. They will be more inclined to bring the younger and less experienced extraterrestrials, such as the younger greys, into a room with the mantis, because the mantis are more psychically capable on average than the greys. And so they'd be willing to have those young greys come near you for the exposure to humans, a safe human, so to speak. And
Yeah.
so I'm not surprised that happened, that you felt, of course, with the clairsentience that we talked about yesterday, how you pick up on the vibration of things, and the claircognizance get the download about them being younger. No wonder you're getting that information. That I love that. That's perfect to me.
Oh, they were
Yeah.
adorable. They were so cute.
Mhm.
So I always, like, when I hear people say, that the Greys that they met were very robotic, they were very, like no personality. I'm not like, oh, not the ones that I met. They were awesome.
I know what you mean. I love most of the Greys I've met. I've only met a couple beings where I've met them. I'm like, you might be more robotic or void of consciousness, might not
Yeah.
actually have a soul. But out of the majority of them, I would say at least 90% of them have a soul, from what you can
Yeah.
tell with their vibration, their personality. And a lot of the Greys, if they don't think that you're going to remember the encounter, they aren't really going to talk to you. They're not going to joke with you. If your first reaction when you see them is very similar to mine, you're like, "Hi, how's it going?" And they're like, "Okay, yeah, this human is clearly very really."
You and I have got to be related somehow, Samantha. Because
I
I'd be
know.
like, what's going on? Where are you guys from? Where are we going? What are we doing?
Me too. And that's like our natural reaction with things. And that's
Yeah.
totally great, because when they know that you're like that and you're like talking to them telepathically, not verbally, they're like, okay, this one has a little more consciousness. We can talk to it, we can joke with it, and it'll probably feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go on craft and you're like, oh God, that's terrifying, they're not going to talk to you.
Yeah.
They're going to want nothing to do with you. They're going to get in, they're going to do the job, they're going to put you back.
Yeah.
So I can see
I
where they're coming from.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that makes total sense. Like, I've never
Yeah,
had a bad encounter. I guess I'm lucky in that
you
way.
are.
Yeah, no, I mean, they've all been, I mean, really nice.
Yeah.
Like, maybe it's just because I talk so much. They're like,
That's
let's
not
just
fair.
get this done and over with, and we can put this one back because she's a lot of work.
Well, I don't think you're a lot of work. I think you were smarter with your soul contracts than I was. I think that's the difference. I'm like, yeah, let's sign up for that. Okay, that sounds hard. I can do that. Yeah, I'll do that. Totally gonna do it.
I'm like, no, not happening.
Healthier boundaries is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
But it's kind of funny, because when we talk about the soul contract aspect, especially look at the genetic soul contracts that get passed on within the hybridization families and then the ET contact families, is we can be incarnating into a family to break contracts with certain groups as well, which is part of what I know. It's one of my jobs, is to break some of the negative contracts that my families have with some of these darker entities. And by darker, I just mean more self-serving. I really wish we'd all get away from that darker versus lighter crap, because it
Yeah,
doesn't necessarily describe it well. But the
I
ones
know.
that are more focused on interest of self-service.
Yes.
But one thing I've found is, because we're talking about very quickly the aspect of families and the aspect of bloodlines when it comes to contact happening over and over. A lot of contact families, we tend to either have a very good contact, or quite a few of them have very negative contact. And when we look at the negative aspect, those ones do tend to be prone to more entity possession, which is where you have some of these entities connecting onto the lower chakras, kind of feeding in and influencing from behind, which is what we see with a lot of the ruling elite families on this planet. They aren't necessarily the reptilian shapeshifters that people think they are, where they're projecting the image of a human over top of the reptilian body. More so, it's they contain a high percentage of reptilian DNA and are being influenced from other dimensional planes into this one. So it's a little different than what people are expecting as well.
Yeah. See, this is why I'm telling you guys, demons need love too, because I work with them and I never have any issues. I've got my demons around to protect me. I do actually have one that stays in my house. I've named him Fred, which is a very demonic name, but
someone who's at the gates of hell, I mean.
Yeah, Fred, So I'll be like, good night, Fred. Anybody else would think I was absolutely nuts. So if all y'all do, that's totally fine. Okay, so I've had this question up, and it sounds really interesting. Jay Breezy wants to know, what are some races of ET typically found in our DNA?
Oh, so we actually have a wide variety of ETs that are found within our DNA. We do have the Pleiadians that are in our DNA. We have Mantis in our DNA. We have Reptilians in our DNA. We have Greys in our DNA. We do have a lot of different races. We do have some Arcturians and Andromedans in there as well, from what I've noticed. Some people do actually have other species, so it's not as much of the higher vibrational beings like the light beings and the crystal beings. It's a little bit different. We tend to be closer towards the things that are more of the fifth and sixth dimension, seem to be more likely. Those are the ones that I know of from the beings that I've encountered and have seen through hybridization, and that have been used for the aspect of altering the way our genetic frequency is in place. And so those are the ones I know for certain. There's a lot that I've speculated about, but it really depends upon who the person is, because just because we all have these as a base level doesn't mean that we all have the same percentage. So if you look at the different races of humanity, you'll actually see there are certain characteristics and features that seem to be more prevalent. And so when we're looking at that, you can recognize how certain ET groups, especially how, for instance, when you look at groups that have more of the percentage of a lot more reptilian DNA, they will tend to be a lot bigger. They will tend to put on muscle more easily. They'll typically have more height to them. They'll have very strong cheekbones and over eye ridges, almost like more of a heavy brow, like where the brow bone actually has that strongness to it. Mm-hmm. That is very commonly found within them as well. And same with the very broad chest, more narrow hips, very commonly found with that. Now, these are found very commonly within some of the more northern European type countries. So going over towards your Dutch people, your German people. This does not mean people from that country are all just that component. That's not what I mean. Yeah. But it just means it's more commonly found within them because they do have a higher percentage of that. Whereas there are certain ET races that I have noticed that are human. I don't know what to classify them as, but I have met one group of ETs in the last 6 months that actually does appear to be very Asian in appearance. And when I met them, I got all excited. I'm like, oh, goodness. Okay, cool. You have a craft. I didn't meet you guys before. And I was just super geeking out. So I'm like, okay, that explains, like, because I was trying to figure out this theory for quite a few years. I'm like, okay, because I was wondering where the Asian features came from with their lovely almond-shaped eyes and just the hair being like more of that like black essence to it with a very high gloss to it. And I was trying to figure it out. And then when I met this group, I realized, okay, so this is where the petite features are coming in. The really like the soft, like rounded face. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. So it's a different ET group that is more responsible for the genetic composition of their race. And I got super excited for this.
Yeah, I've heard of them before, actually.
Yeah. Whereas when we look at some of the people from like Aldebaran, they are, of course, very close to your people from like very far northern Europe who have very white skin, very pale complexions, blue eyes, not really as much on the darker hair or darker eyebrows. Whereas we look at the people that have more of the Lyran complexions. So Lyra, for those of you who don't know, is of course the cradle of humanity. And that's actually where a lot of humans came from. But within Lyra, they also do have, that is where a lot of the red hair came from as well. Is redheads, the redhead humans were, well, not necessarily the nicest of humans. And they did end up, they did end up having more of the cat DNA to them, which of course within the reptilian aspect can be very mongering against each other, more at odds. And that aspect did come over as well with humans. That did form a lot of our Celtic genetics, is that it does have that component to it. And when we're looking at this aspect, I love how when you look at humans, the people that tend to have, how can I explain this? Oh, there's just so much to it. So I've totally lost the question. My head's just like swimming all over the place right now.
No, that's totally fine. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So it's interesting that the different facial features, like, so if you look at someone,
Yeah.
and can you kind of tell what,
Sometimes.
yeah, just by their facial structure?
Yeah, sometimes. And you can also look at people. Here, let's use some celebrity examples just to give you a good idea about people that have higher percentages of different genetic structures. So, for instance, if you were to look at Kate Middleton, she has a very classic female reptilian body, very narrow hips, a very long and lanky type body, very strong cheekbones, eyes that are almond shaped but slightly recessed, and a very like longer reptilian smile. And so that is a very classic reptilian female appearance. Whereas if you were to look at a lot of football players, they tend to have much closer to the male reptilian body type to them, where they have more of the larger heads, of very broad, strong shoulders, that aspect. They tend to have more of that like slightly shorter neck, like they have bigger trapezoid muscles, which makes it look like their neck is a little bit shorter when it's not, the chest being very, very bigger. So almost anyone you see in the hockey, like professional hockey players, professional football players, people of that body type tend to have more of the reptilian aspect to them. Whereas when you look at some other people, oh my goodness, who should I go with off the top of my head? So I'm not very good at celebrity culture because I'm not terribly
How
interested in
about
those people.
I was going to say Leonardo da Vinci, Leonardo DiCaprio.
I can't recall his face very well off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. He has a really interesting face. That's why I was curious. Let me see if I can find a picture of him.
I remember him from Titanic, but that's about it. But he does have a lot of Lyran aspects to him if you were to look at him. Because when you look at the way, like I remember just from the movie Titanic, which I haven't seen in years, mind you, but the way his eyes sit, he does have a certain cat-like aspect to his appearance.
See that?
Oh, thank you. See how the eyes look very cat-like?
Yeah.
How they have like that, almost like that feline kind of essence to it, very similar to like Hunter. That's where we can see the feline genetics coming forward. Whereas with other people, oh my goodness, we've all seen people where we've looked at them, and for instance, Cara Delevingne or something like that, some Victoria's Secret runway model, she has a lot of actually fairy essence to her, a lot of that fairy energy. And you could tell by the high cheekbones, the elfy type ears, the very mischievous pixie kind of eyes going on as I look at you, who's got a lot of fairy energy to you. It's kind of funny. So that's one component of it. But then you also have to look at people, for instance, if you were, oh my goodness, how can I explain this? There are certain people, oh, I'm going to have to bring pictures next time. I'm sorry. I should have actually thought to have pictures out.
Well, that's okay. That means you have to come on again. That's okay.
But there are people who you can look at them and tell that they have a higher percentage of ET DNA, but normally you can tell by there are certain ET features that are more prevalent. A lot of ET starseeds have very piercing eyes. They tend to have this kind of awkward type appearance to them. This sounds really mean, but we tend to have either very big heads, which is very common for us, or on a very small heads. A lot of us tend to look very lanky looking or slightly disproportionate because our arms almost look like they're too long for our body. A lot of us have very long fingers, also very knobby typically. There's not that sweet, elegance and simplicity you see with a lot of the earth angels. Like, you know, how you meet people who you're like, oh my goodness, you're seriously like an angel incarnate, and how they often have like these very sweet, delicate faces. It's not that. A lot of the starseeds actually look kind of, we're all slightly awkward looking in a beautiful way, but still very awkward looking. That sounds mean, but
no,
like,
I think it's hilarious.
Well, it's because the way the genetics are in us, like they do seem to be not quite in the same kind of components like you'd normally expect them to be. It's almost like the ears look like they don't quite fully always match with the face and stuff like that. It's just because we're different genetics. That's all. Yeah.
I've been told all my life that people think that I have elven energy.
I can totally see that.
I was just kind of like, okay.
Well, you do. Like, you do have a lot of pixie and fairy energy to you, but I don't think pixie as much because pixies are mischievous and troublemakers and tend to take things around your house and hide them and be a little bit, they're bratty, at least in my experience. Pixies are bratty, and you're not so much.
So I will take it back then when I said that I don't like working with fairies. Maybe it's pixies that are too high maintenance that I don't like.
That's fair.
Okay.
I could see that.
All right. So, Sovereign Cosmic Wildman, I've had this question up for a while. Is it true that they can clone someone simply by looking at a yearbook, then digging into that person's medical records and stealing their DNA so they can lab grow that person? Wow.
That's a hard one because I don't have a very clear answer on that. I know that a lot of my labs have clones. I know that doesn't matter whether we're a negative blood type or not, O negative, O positive, A, B, A or B, it doesn't matter. They do have clones of all those blood types. So the fallacy of they can literally clone anyone's DNA, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think to an extent you do have to have some form of soul contract in place for them to be able to take enough of a portion of the consciousness to be able to make a clone of that person easily and without it actually doing the same thing that a lot of hybrids do, which is where they become mentally unstable if it's the wrong genetic composition in place.
Yeah.
And so I don't think they necessarily are like, oh, let's look at this year's elementary school yearbooks and pick out what kids we're going to clone for pedophile rings. I don't necessarily believe that's how it works based on everything that I've been exposed to.
Okay.
So
well, that's good. All right. So this is something that you probably encounter. I have encountered this as well. And Jeff says it very respectfully. Sorry, I'm not being disrespectful, but to the normal people, this stuff sounds nuts. How do you address that?
I fully agree with you. To normal people, this stuff does sound nuts. But I mean, we also do live in an insane world where everything that we are taught is actually inverted. Doctors do ruin medicine, lawyers ruin law. Our law officials actually take the laws that should be just and fair and invert them so it's only fair for the elite. And so I do understand the component of looking at this and thinking, yes, this stuff does sound crazy, but everything is first ridiculed and scoffed at before it is recognized and then accepted. People used to laugh that the world was round. They didn't believe that. People used to believe that the sun would rotate around the earth, and we've come to learn that those things aren't true. And when I look at this stuff, I can understand where these people are coming from, and they'll think extraterrestrials, how could they have been busy on this for thousands of years? And as soon as someone says that to me, I think, you are adorable. I appreciate the question, but it's clear to me that you're very uneducated about this because there's not a single culture on this planet, when you look at the ancient history of it, that does not have record of extraterrestrials and multidimensionals coming to visit, including the Vatican. If you look at the paintings from the Renaissance times, there are countless ones that have pictures of quote unquote demons in them, as well as the paintings that have the extraterrestrial ships. Same thing can be said with the various temples throughout the world having grays carved into them, or ET craft as well. Even the depiction of angels being mentioned in the Bible, it does talk about them being these wheels of light. Well, how else would you describe a light body craft? How else would you describe a light, like a light being or a crystal being? They would appear to be so far different from what people are expecting. They don't quite make sense to normal people, and I understand that and appreciate that. And I do understand where people are coming from. I love that people are willing to have a questioning mind. I totally appreciate that. But in the same way that there are things that I don't understand and you don't understand, I try, when I don't understand something, to look into it more to gain an informed opinion rather than just scoffing at it.
Yeah.
So I totally understand where Jeff is coming from with people thinking we do sound crazy.
Right. Absolutely. And oftentimes I find if someone asks a question, say something like that, I'm like, okay, well, we're definitely not getting into the hybridization program conversation. Like you just kind of feel the room.
But I also would remind people when they look at the aspects of this and they're thinking that a lot of things we're talking about are nuts, I would remind them of how there's been a lot of soft disclosure through a lot of our media over the years, indicating predictive programming of things that are not only going on, but things that are to come as well. Everything from 9/11 to the various HARP type aspects, to the shooting incidents, to the aspect of how we're getting closer towards the disclosure of extraterrestrials and multidimensionals, and how things like hybridization have been shown in as early as the 80s and the 90s on TV, showing that these things were happening, and reminding them about things like that as well.
Yeah, that's actually very true. I had a question for you. You mentioned angels in the Bible. So I've always thought of angels as interdimensional beings. What are they?
Angels they're kind of complicated. When people think angels, they think every single angel is completely good. And that's not actually accurate. Angels can be just as self-serving as we are. For instance, look at the fallen angel component. Those are angels that chose to be more focused on the service of self than the service to all, which is understandable. But when we look at angels, and the ones that I've met, people think they're going to be these beautiful people with this long flowing hair and robes and wings and a harp, and I've never seen an angel like that. If you actually ask these beings what they look like when they appear to you, a lot of them will start to show you an auric coloring at first, and normally they'll actually start to show what's known as a light being. A light being is a almost like a non-gendered body that has a energetic vibration that could be either female, male, or non-gendered. And they actually look like they're comprised of light. Sometimes the light will be white, like a crystal quartz that has like rainbows contained within, that kind of circulates and moves like liquid smoke. Like when you go to have dry ice with pouring water over top, that kind of moves like that. A lot of angels tend to look like that, where they have this ethereal type component to them that's kind of waving outwards. They are more see-through because they are higher dimensional beings. They will not be in a physical form as we are. And so the reason why that is they're actually from a much higher dimensional plane where they have moved past the same physical laws that we're in at this time. And so when I talked earlier about some being an earth angel, and I just feel like I should circle around to this, their soul can actually be of that higher dimensional consciousness and making the choice to incarnate into this level of consciousness to be a better assistance than from being of assistance from out there. Because if you're in here, you can actually sometimes make a greater change than if you're outside trying to work the internal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've met some of them. They're great. Oh, you want to hear a weird story about an angel? Yeah. Okay. The first time I ever saw Lucifer, this is bizarre. He looked like Anubis. And I thought it was Anubis. Yes. And I thought it was Anubis. And I was just kind of like, all right. After a while, it was, it took probably a couple of months. After a while, he kind of revealed himself to me. And I was just like, well, like, why did you look like Anubis? And he was just like, well, I knew that was a form you wouldn't be afraid of, which I was kind of like, okay. I mean, I get that. Like, I do have connections to ancient Egypt and I love Anubis. So I was just kind of like, okay, but it was weird. It was very weird. Like, I'll just say it. It was weird.
I believe it. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting him yet. And I say pleasure because meeting anybody in the universe can be a pleasure. It really can. I wish people would actually look at it from a different perspective. We're all so heavily programmed that we think that all of these beings can either be good or bad, not realizing that some of the ones that we've been trained to think are good can actually be bad, and some of the ones that we actually been trained to think are bad can actually be good. And I really wish people would take that into consideration when we look at the inversion of all things, especially when people start to look at things like the material of, for instance, David Icke, where it starts talking about how there is a really big inversion going on. And there's a ruling elite program that is in place to make it so we don't recognize the truth of our divinity and everything else in the world, which I love that he brings up. But I feel so a lot of people, they're willing to go that far and see how we have these people that are blocking our consciousness from moving forward, who are focused on the service itself, but they aren't willing to take the next step into the extraterrestrial multidimensional realm of it. So I do understand that, but the same principle of the inversion is actually applied to a lot of our beings that we work with, where we think we have to go to church to connect to God, when actually that divinity is within and we're all a part of that consciousness. So, but what does Lucifer look like? Like, I haven't met him, so I have no idea what he looks like.
And I don't know if this is just the way that he presented himself to me. And it didn't freak me out when I first saw him. When I first saw him, I was like, oh, hello. But I was watching the show Sabrina on Netflix, the new Sabrina. Have you seen it at all?
Yeah.
The actor that plays Lucifer looked exactly like that, but it was about 4 years before the show ever came out.
I could see that.
But he did have wings, but he had brown wings, like a robin, instead of white wings. Yeah.
I love that. Beautiful. So kind of like on the show Lucifer, how I believe his brother Michael, I think, had brown wings.
Yes, that's right. He did. And when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, I've never really seen that anywhere else. So it was very cool.
Which I can appreciate a lot of these shows because they are showing some of the diversity of these beings and helping it to be more further explained to the consciousness in a soft disclosure even about a lot of these beings. It's really fascinating to me.
It is. But man, when Lucifer first walked out on that show, I was like, come on.
Too pretty. I'm sorry. Too pretty.
Come on. Like, that was freaking me out. I was like, he looks exactly like the one that I saw.
That's awesome.
All right, this is an interesting question Marie has. I am curious, what do they think of you girls sharing your experiences with us? Do they tell you what you can say and what you shouldn't, and what shouldn't be shared? Do they ever come back and reprimand? If so, how?
Oh, so the beings that I work with typically have given me a go ahead to share all of my experiences with extraterrestrials and multidimensional beings, Marie. They want to help to make it so people understand the normality of them, help to humanize them, so to speak, showing how there can be good, bad, and everything in between, and multiple shades of gray between all these different types of beings. And the majority of the perspectives, if you're willing to share our experiences, as I share mine, and of course, as Lynn shares hers, it helps to further expand the vibration of allowing everyone to share because it feels like more of a safe place, which is part of the reason why they want for us to be sharing. I do get in trouble once in a while when I share things I'm not allowed to, and I have had them talk to me. I've never been punished physically by ETs when it comes, well, some ETs, some of them can be a little more mean. Um, the majority of them have been kind. The majority of them, if I say something that they don't want me to say, they'll literally ask me either telepathically or they'll have an abduction with me and they'll be like, could you please not talk about this in the future? This is what happened when you talked about this because you explained it in this way. So if you are going to talk about it, we need you to explain it in that way. And it's because they don't want to cause more damage for humanity. They want to make things be done in a very loving way that we can handle at the time. The only ones that I've had some issue with is the one reptilian who did rape me. He didn't appreciate the Pleiadian aspect of my soul, sharing what my experiences were with reptilians and the way that I was sharing them when I was younger. Because the majority of my experiences when I was younger with reptilians did put me into a fear state because I didn't understand their culture. I didn't understand the way in which they present themselves. So of course I viewed them from a state more in fear. And it was after that point where the one raped me that I actually started having some good reptilians come forward and be like, I'm so sorry. We did not know that that one was going to do that. We did not realize that would happen. We do not have that feeling towards you. We would not want to hurt you. Let's try to help heal you. And so some of them will reprimand and take justice into their own hands how they see fit, but a lot of them won't. I'm more afraid of the humans that abduct me through the MyLab experiences than I am with the extraterrestrials and multidimensionals because they're the ones that are more painful. But most of them will just talk to you if you step outside the lines. And now they've gotten better at explaining, share this with people, don't share this with people. Or you can share this in a couple of years, not yet. So that's how it's shifted for me.
Yeah. I haven't had, like, at least I don't remember my experiences quite as much as you. I have had a lot of experiences, but I only remember bits and pieces. So I've never had any issues with that. But I also, for the longest time, I didn't share my experiences. So I have been very, I guess, cautious in the past about that with whom I would share the experiences with people that I knew would understand who had been through similar experiences. But now, no, I've never had any, at least not that I remember. I mean, maybe they told me and I just don't remember it. Like, hey, don't do that one. But no, nothing that I can remember. Oh, wait, what was this? Oh, Applesauce said, I saw a leprechaun and tried to catch him.
I've never seen one. What was that like? That sounds amazing.
I know. I want to know, how big was the leprechaun?
Did he have little pants on? I mean, I want to see him. Oh my God.
That was amazing.
That was funny.
There was a whole leprechaun conversation that we missed. When I was a kid, I got lost in the woods looking for the gold at the end of the rainbow. That's so
cute. Jim, that's amazing.
Angels, our life says yes, they reprimand. So she's had that.
Sometimes they can. It really depends on the group and how you respond to it. For instance, I don't respond well to anyone yelling at me, threatening me, being violent with me. My natural reaction is to go straight towards energy protection. I can be a spiteful little monkey who throws energy balls at them. So they have found the better response with me is to sit down with me and talk to me about these things.
Yes, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. So hold on. Somebody said, oh my goodness. You guys have so many good questions and I'm so sorry. I know there was one. Somebody wanted you to talk more about MyLab experiences. And I think it was just, general question.
Sure. If you want to ask another question about what aspect of MyLab experiences, I'm happy to go into MyLab stuff in the meantime if you want. Like, it's not a big deal to me.
Well, I can't seem to find it. Whoever you were, I'm so sorry. I can't seem to find you. If you have anything specific, oh, here it is. S. Naughton. If you have anything specific that you wanted to know about MyLab experiences, then please let us know. There's a couple other questions, so why don't we try to get to those while we're waiting to see. G. West wants to know, what alien species has the best designed spaceship? Opinion question.
Ooh, In my opinion, I actually prefer light ships over any of the physical ships. So a light ship is one that you'll see with light beings, and they actually are comprised fully of higher vibrational consciousness that you can step into. And it's almost like you become one with the ship. It's quite beautiful. My least favorite ships are actually the ones I've met with cone heads, which are black triangular craft that appear to be very small inside. My favorite ET one, when we're looking at that component, actually tends to have more of the multi-dimensional type beings. So ones where you'll see actually multiple species on board, where they have Arcturians and they have Pleiadians and they have various kinds of hybrids and Andromedans working together, because they tend to be extremely large craft. Think of the equivalency of a city where they actually have parks on board. They'll have some small lakes. They'll have little areas that are more, I guess like the best way to describe it is like it's almost like little sections that are more like little towns. How when you go into a mall house, sometimes they'll have little buildings that are kind of separate, where it has that more natural energy to it. But when there's other sections that are more opened up, like if there are multiple floors, how that kind of look out, like you're looking out towards Central Park type thing. And the reason why I prefer these really big craft is it almost has that more. It is a slightly artificial environment, yes, because they are brighter craft. They don't feel like a planet in the essence that it doesn't have the same vibrational frequency of a planet, but it has that aspect where it's very calming, very love based, especially when you can walk through the gardens. I've actually been on quite a few crafts where they have these super large garden areas where you can actually go sit on either something very similar to grass, or sit underneath a tree that's been growing on this craft for hundreds of years, if not possibly thousands of years, that are absolutely massive. And you can feel the vibration of it looking, and it feels like it's a part of the craft. Like there's this energetic exchange going, because the crafts do tend to have this very harmonious, energetic feel to them, because they don't have the natural disaster stress that we have. They have the protective measures around the craft that actually keep it so they don't have that same stress factor of the external influences coming in, and they don't have the energy of war, so it has a strong sense of peace to it. The one other thing that I really like is on some of the crafts, you will notice that they'll still have small insects that are around, things like butterflies, things like even like little caterpillars that can be found on them. Not necessarily the invasive ones. You won't find things like wasps, but you will find things that are very similar to bees. You can tell are pollinators that do go around as well. And you will see multiple ETs that actually go sit out there and put themselves in a relaxed type state. It's not necessarily a state of sleep, but it's a state of relaxation, very similar to like a meditation. And that's one of my favorite types of craft.
It's interesting that you say that. So the one craft that I remember anything about was an Arcturian craft, and it sounds very similar. I didn't see the entire craft. I only saw portions of it, or at least I only remember portions of it. So there may have been other beings on there. I don't know. But the one thing I really vividly remember is they showed me this. It was kind of like I don't even know how to describe it. It was like this meditation healing chamber.
Yeah. Yeah.
And where they basically taught me how to project my consciousness into it so that I go to it at any time, which was awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah. I haven't done it in a while. I don't know why, but I used to do it all the time because it had that same feel that you're talking to, that it was just a very like comforting, calming energy to the ship.
I agree. And that's one of the things that I like, I just bought a house a few years ago and I got so excited. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to paint like all the rooms different colors. I had like yellow and green and blue and purple. Like this used to be purple. And then I realized that all those colors were stressing me out. And I'm like, okay, well, what colors relax me? And I went to the colors that I actually saw on craft. And I went to more of these, like these whites and these creams and these soft grays. And when I did that, I actually found that it was so similar to the vibrations that I had on craft that it actually took a lot of the external stress and anxiety away. And so one thing I've found is that whenever I do go onto craft and I spend a significant amount of time there, whether it's going up there to be pregnant with my hybrid children, have them then be brought back down, or go up for teaching, or go up to go through my orchestrated relationships and stuff like that, or go through the aspect of being taught myself, it is very minimalistically focused. And so I'm in the process of going through my entire home and bringing back some of those ET interior design philosophies, which is everything having a purpose and very minimalistically focused, because I found that aspect put me in such a harmonized state that I'm trying to recreate that in my earth home as well.
That's what you were telling me to do yesterday, isn't it?
To an extent, yeah.
So GUS, you see, you must have known that this question was out there. I love interior design, and I'm curious of which species has the best interior design spaceship. That's a
You
great
would
question.
probably love the Pleiadians. And the reason why I say that you probably love the Pleiadians is when you look around our homes, we have all these like rectangles and squares and everything has these pointy edges. Whereas on the Pleiadian type planets and their craft, a lot of it has very smooth corners. They are very light colored. It is a lot of cream tones, very soft diffused lighting. It has this, like they have a lot of plants in their craft. They do have crystalline type essence. And I do feel as though when I talk about crystalline essence, that means they have a lot of crystals everywhere. And that doesn't mean like just a lot of like random crystals. They have like some very large crystals as well on the craft because the crystals emit these very grounding, very loving vibrations that help to harmonize not only psychically, but help to really clear away the stress, the anxiety, and the frustration. Because when humans are away from a planet for too long, it's very hard for us to ground, which can make us feel very scattered. And that's just part of how our biological system works at this time. And that's okay. We're still very connected to our planet, the same way a child is very connected to its mother in the first couple of years of life. And that's fine. But the one thing I love about the Pleiadian craft is they tend to have everything being so organized, so simplistic, and very well thought out. It's like going to a spa and how everything has its place and it's exactly what you need, but really none of the additional clutter. And that was the thing I liked most about it, is it felt so calming and so homey to me. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I
That's
accidentally
okay.
muted my mic.
Okay.
I just saying, I wish my house was like that, but I just have so many books and things. I don't know. I need to start getting more like
Yeah.
electronic books. So
Yeah. No,
I
no,
know they're not the same.
don't get the electronic books. There are so many ETs that also collect human things, so please don't get rid of your books.
Oh, I
Don't.
never would get rid of them, but
Oh,
yeah, there's not a, I mean, this, you see one bookcase, there's more. It's terrible. And I haven't even read all of them. I just feel like, oh, by osmosis, I'll get the information.
but it's not terrible. In your next house, you'll manifest having a library where you can put all that and you'll have the perfect spot
Yes.
for everything.
Oh, I
Yeah.
would love a library.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's see. Sorry. So, Angie, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. What do you think about the synchronicity of numbers and messages?
I full-heartedly agree with synchronicity and numbers and messages. A lot of things that I've found is that the higher dimensional beings that we work with, our spirit guides and our angelic beings, use number synchronicity and word synchronicity to get our attention, to show us when we're on the right path. If you actually want to be able to better connect to your angels and guides, start paying attention to synchronicities in your life, and you'll fall into the energetic pathway that you need to be on to actually complete your life's mission. When things are working out in your favor and it feels like everything is light and going right, and that you're actually having everything work out, it's because you're following the energy in the direction you're supposed to be. When it feels like nothing's working out for you and it's all chaotic and stressful, it's because you're not supposed to be going down that direction. So follow those signs and synchronicities. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Ride Till I Die wants to know, do the aliens have a god or higher power that they worship? If so, what is the name of it?
Well, they don't necessarily worship it. They connect to it and they call it source. They don't call it God, Allah, Mother Earth, none of that. They do view it as the universal consciousness that interconnects all things. And they do it not the same way we do. When we think worship, we think of having temples and churches and cathedrals, and it happened to be very devout, and it happened to be an organized religion type thing, and some do that. The reptilians have a different level of understanding when it comes to the aspect of worship than we will see with some of the other races. For instance, the Pleiadians are very much so connected towards the harmonized energy of nature, and very similar to like a matriarchy type aspect, where they're looking at the divine feminine, divine masculine working together to be in a more harmonious, unified. Sex is very sacred and spiritual to them. And so they won't necessarily have marriages and relationships like how we do here on Earth. How we have our relationships actually very reptilian component and part of reptilian culture that we have in place. Whereas when you look at some of the other energies and beings, they won't breed the same way we do. And this is related to the aspect of God, because the human aspect and religion aspect is very different from many ETs, because we got sucked into the reptilian understanding of source, where it's viewed as one being and it has to be masculine. And because the reptilians are very focused on the divine masculine, they've actually disconnected from the aspect of source that is the divine feminine. So they're taking the top part of the triangle, which is the unification of both, and they're just switching to the bottom section triangle rather than the other component that needs to be understood. Whereas I've noticed that with the beings like the Pleiadians, they tend to be very connected towards the divine feminine, but also still connected to the divine masculine, but they do seem to be more of a matriarchy in place. The Mantis beings seem to have a very strong connection towards the love of nature as well, but they do worship more of the source aspect or the universal connection of everything. It's not the way we view worship. It's they are very heavy into meditation because that's what connects them in. They're more psychic because they trust that source energy rather than turning outward to everyone else to find the answers. They seek inwards. That's the difference between them and us.
Interesting. I think I have like a mantis mentality. Everything you say, I'm like, yes, that's what I think too.
Fine.
Jennifer wants to know, are some ETs of angel nature?
Individuals can be, yes, but any one species as a whole is not. Do not let people say all Pleiadians are good or all of the angelic beings are good or all the fairies are good. That's a very naive perspective. When people look at the extraterrestrial aspect, a lot of people want to find a savior to come step in and heal them and do everything they need to do. And yes, a lot of these beings are willing to heal you, teach you, work with you, but they expect for you to do the work. Yeah, they will come heal you, but you're going to have to make the lifestyle changes. You're going to have to be the one who's not drinking a lot, who's not doing drugs, who's not smoking, who's not doing things to ruin your body. If they are going to be working with you in the angelic capacity that a lot of us think of, they expect you to put a lot of work in. It's not angels in the traditional viewpoint that a lot of us grew up with. That's actually an inaccurate place of perception where we've idolized them, and that they are very afraid of that component with humanity, and that's why they're very reluctant to step forward in a large scale. Even the Galactic Federation of Light and the United aspect of light doesn't want to step forward to humanity too much because they want us to, as a collective, make the decision to be better as a whole. That way they'll come down and help us. They don't want to solve our problems for us because then we're dependent on them, and they don't want that.
Right. Well, it's just like with your children. You know, you have to teach them how to be able to handle things on their own, because otherwise, yeah, they will be dependent on you for the rest of their lives. And who wants that? Not me.
I agree. I don't. And neither do they. That's one thing they're very concerned about, especially when it comes to ones like the Pleiadians. They do have, because they're very, in one sense, genetically close to us, at least in comparison to like a full mantis or a full reptilian, the Pleiadians are actually quite close. So a lot of their healing technology does work on the same way, and say with the hybrid species, might add, when it comes to healing our bodies and getting them back to being in a perfect state of being, because many of us actually have inflammation in the body, and we also have cancers that are latent and diseases that are right on the urge of erupting because of our toxic environments, the DNA actually being in a state where it's kind of chaotic. And so they want to come help us and heal us and to give us this tech, but they don't want to do it if it means that we're going to now view them as being these gods. That's not the role they want to step into.
Yeah, well, that makes sense for sure. Okay, Sovereign Cosmic Wildman. What does Samantha know about the Hyperborea? Is that where the Nordic types come from?
I don't know what Hyperborea is. I'm sorry, Sovereign Cosmic Wildman. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I haven't heard of that one. It's interesting.
No.
Let's see. Oh, they were talking about it a little bit, but I don't see anything that's that specifies what it is.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay. Julio Rodriguez says they have free will. They have will like we have free will. Absolutely.
Definitely. Undoubtedly. That's the one thing that a lot of the ETs are very keen on, is they have soul contracts in place with the majority of extraterrestrials and multidimensionals that you meet. If they are having contact or abduction with the humans, they have soul contracts with those humans before that human incarnates onto this planet, especially if that human makes a choice to incarnate into a bloodline that is being contacted. And so that is one way that they can find out more about what's going on down on the planet. It's also one way that they can harvest and collect genetic material or continue their hybridization programs, is through having part of their own type incarnate into the Earth atmosphere, into the Earth bodies, and then to collect these samples, so to speak. And then the person may forget that they have made these contracts when they come onto the planet, and they may be like, well, why are they abducting me? I wouldn't have made this choice, not remembering their life between lives or their former lifetime where they made that agreement.
Yeah.
Yes, they love music. They love the sound of the stars. They love the sound of the plants. They do appreciate classical music. Some I have heard that some ETs do actually like rock, although I've never heard that playing on craft. And I know when I sing to my hybrid children, I'm not good at singing, might I add, at least not compared to a lot of the beings out there. And they do appreciate thing like the hybrid children really do love all forms of lullabies and songs that we sing to them. You could sing to them something ridiculous. And if you're sending good telepathic imagery with it, they will still enjoy it. They do have an appreciation of the vibration as long as it's not chaotic. A
Mm.
lot of them, if you like think of it this way, music is a vibration. And so they will a lot of them will go around the planets and collect the sounds of the planetary like music coming out of it, the planetary sound, and they will actually use that to create their own form of music because it can be very healing, very therapeutic in the same way that if we walk into a spa and we hear the sound of birds chirping and we hear the sound of waterfalls going, it's very calming for us. It relaxes the aura. Same thing can be said with them. And so the one thing I found with my hybrid children is if I sing to them, it actually helps them to be stronger, healthier, happier hybrids. Because when they're, especially when they're very little, they find that connection towards the song and they actually seem to be healthier for it mentally and physically.
Interesting. Well, that makes sense too, because I mean, vibration is healing as well.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Angels are alive. She's asked this question. I'm so sorry, Angels. I did see this question and I meant to get to it. She asked it a couple of times. What about humans who have thick bones, heavy bones? What race do they come from?
I'm not absolutely certain, but I would suspect either the Mantis beings or I would suspect the Anunnaki. And the reason why I would suspect those two is the Anunnaki are extremely tall. I don't know what their actual race name is. I know Anunnaki just means from the stars or from the heavens, and I'm not sure what planet it is, but I have seen beings that are very large, very, like, they do appear to be humanoid, but appear to be of a much builder and stronger frame build. And the Mantis beings I know have exceptionally hard and strong bones of their exoskeleton, so it could be a component of that as well.
It's interesting. See, I would think of a mantis being like I think of a praying mantis, and they're so delicate. But I mean that makes sense. They are quite large. So interesting. So Dry Toast, I love the name. What beings fly the long white cylinder looking crafts?
That's a good question, Dry Toast. I haven't seen any long white cylinder crafts, so I don't know. Haven't encountered those ones.
Oh, there he is, my man, David Hurley. Music is a metaphor for the universe, balance, dynamics, harmony, and frequency.
Fully agree.
Yeah. Okay, Rye has a good question. Can you talk about Agartha, Inner Earth? Who inhabits and how do they live if it really exists?
There's only 3 beings that I've met that I suspect could be from the Inner Earth, and it's only 3. They are 3 women. One had completely white hair, one had very light blonde hair, and one had very soft red hair. When I say soft, like mine has more brown than hers. Hers was like, it wasn't quite strawberry blonde. It was a little bit like more of that like gingery kind of aspect of red. And they were the only 2 that I met who possibly encountered or from the Inner Earth. And the reason why I say that is they end up coming onto my balcony on my deck before coming into my home through my sliding glass door. And when I saw them, I was confused because I saw this really interesting craft, but it didn't feel like ET craft. A lot of craft, when they come from space or come downwards, you can kind of feel them. You can feel the vibration of it coming down, but these ones seem to come from the earth, and it was a little bit confusing for me. I don't know much about their interior aspect outside of knowing that these 3 women appear to be more pale than any humanoid ET that I've ever met. They seem to be very void of sun. The thing that I noticed about them was they wore these long cloaks that went over top of their dresses that were very close fitting to the body. They seem to be more telepathically focused with one another, but they did try to speak verbally to me. It seemed very different than how I've heard Pleiadians speak or other like humanoid ETs speak, in the sense that these ones felt like English was a language that they're trying very hard to hide the accent or dialect of their true tongue with, because it just didn't seem like it came across very naturally when they were saying it. I didn't go with them into their home. They came into this home. And that's where I don't know much about their world. I do suspect it exists because when they did come and they showed a ET craft, it didn't have the same aspect to it like a lot of ET crafts did. And so I was wondering if they did a screen memory on me to show the image of a craft, yet use vortex technology, which is very common for beings as well.
Awesome. All right. I have to apologize if you guys keep seeing me do this, because I keep seeing movement like out of the corner of my eye. And I think it's because I'm talking to you, Samantha. I I don't know who's here. I keep like looking. It's a little weird. Okay. It's okay. Maybe your guys.
Your clairvoyance.
Let's see. Oh, this is a good question. Jennifer wants to know, are humans, in your opinion, more alien than mammalian? Oh, it rhymes too. I love it.
Jennifer, in my opinion, yes, we are definitely more ET than we are from Earth. The reason why I feel this is when I was talking to the beings that I work with, they said that the humans on this planet were seeded here, they were brought here from Lyra, and that they were modified while they were down here. So in my understanding with everything they've explained, that means that we were going from a form of more pure human in the original component to coming down here being genetically, in one sense, inserted with a lot of different ET genetics over time and then modified.
Stone Hobbit wants to know, does your guest know what being is writing messages in my surrounding sky? That's interesting. I've never heard that one before.
No, I don't understand what you mean. What do you mean messages in your surrounding sky? It could be telepathic downloads that you're seeing on a visual level, which would be related to your clairvoyance. But no, I'm sorry, Stone Hobbit. I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Right till I die, he said, it's Fred. I see Fred all the time. I don't think it's Fred. Fred has no problem showing himself to me.
Well, that and Fred is on a slight familiar capacity with you. So why would Fred go to someone he doesn't know? It doesn't make sense.
Oh, no, I think he's talking about what I keep seeing out of the corner of my eye.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay. Jennifer, is it possible we can be kin to hybrids or ETs and not know it?
Yes, you definitely can, especially some families go through hybrid, like for instance, when we're looking at the aspect of hybridization, think of it this way. You have how many thousands of family members that were before you on your family tree just to make you, Jennifer. And you could have within part of your family tree sections of it that went through more extensive hybridization. And yet if there's any genetic complication that they are not enjoying the aspect of, they can choose to take that section of the family tree out of the hybridization component. For instance, my parents on both sides, my grandparents going all the way back have gone through hybridization. My sister and I are very close in age. I'm still in hybridization and will maintain being so for a long time yet she, even in her early childhood, was not approved of to go to hybridization because of the way her genetics were, and so she was taken as a hybridization tree. That does not mean that she's not related to the hybrid still and that she doesn't still have ET contact. It just means that she doesn't have the same amount of ET contact in this lifetime that I have, or the direct connection to it. She does still have her abductions, which will take care of her health, which will come to teach her things, but she will not get the same experience with hybrid children that I've had because she does not have her own.
Interesting. So when you say that they're looking for, like looking at our genetics, what type of genetic markers are they looking for? Do you know?
So when you're looking at genetic markers, there's a couple things that you need to take into consideration. They're not just looking at your basic like A, T, G, and C. They're actually looking at it in a more expanded form. So when certain genetic combinations are turned on, for instance, yes, we are becoming more psychic as a species. However, if we're having beings that are more psychic as a species coming into play, and we see that, okay, this one over here doesn't show a tendency towards addiction, but this one over here has the genetic markers turned on to be more prone to addiction, then that could be a problem. They may choose to not have that one be bred. Same can be said when it comes to mental imbalances. One thing that they have found within the hybridization program is that the combination of stress within the human genetics, and when you're looking at, especially when there's things like world wars going on, intense famine, intense disease, think of the plagues that have gone around the earth, things like that can actually change the way the genetic composition is. And they can make it so that those genetics, when bred with ET genetics, even though they're having two humans breed, they will still insert ET DNA into those humans. That's why sometimes you get things to drink, sometimes you'll have things put into your body, different kinds of implants, different types of medical things done to you. That way you have different reactions within the hybrid children that are being created. It is a form of experiment per se, but they're trying to get certain genetic traits brought forward. Whereas if they notice that, okay, well, when I mix Samantha's genetics with this type of person's genetics, even though neither one of them has signs of schizophrenia, we notice that it still causes, let's say, a medical issue like something like respiratory illness, or more prone to depression, or more prone to lack of telepathic capability. Okay, that person's not a good breeding match with her. We're going to switch that person out and bring someone new in. And okay, what are the genetic combinations like with this person who has more of the draconian DNA or has more of the gray DNA? And this, they both have these percentages. Let's see how they match. And so it is a bit of a numbers game. It's like breeding dogs to get certain traits. And I hate to make it sound like we're dogs, but it's probably the best way to kind of give a comparable. If you're trying to get certain traits bred into this certain breed, you'll find within certain pups, you won't breed them because they don't have those same markers. It's the same thing being said with our genetics. And they do have a problem with a lot of the hybrids going through mental imbalance. They do have a problem with a lot of the hybrids not being as strong telepathically, having more of the emotional turbulence without it, because they are wanting to breed emotions back into a lot of the different species, but they're not wanting to have it come in such a way where, like, let's say someone has a lot of very violent and physically violent tendencies. They're not going to want to have those ones come in and play as much. And so if they notice the family's going through a lot of, let's say, abuse, and that the person's developing a mental pattern of behavior where they are now starting to become physically reactive as an overall pattern to stop the abuse from occurring, or if they're using that abuse on other people, then they may choose to stop breeding that person because of the patterns coming into play and not wanting to pass those patterns on to their hybrids.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Ozzy's sister wants to know, are hybrid children incubated in test tubes?
Not from what I've seen, but I have seen hybrid children grown in egg sacs, like ostrich sacs. Think of how big an ostrich egg is. I've seen quite a few of my hybrids in the developing amniotic sac like that. And that's very common as well. Sometimes they will actually take you out of time, which means that I will get abducted by ETs. I will be taken up onto craft with my primary breeding partner. He and I will end up having a lot of sex, and I will actually end up staying for a length of time they take for the gestation to grow the baby from fertilization all the way through delivery, and then be brought back in time to where I was actually taken, and then my period will start, and I will have a really intense, almost like post-delivery menstruation, because they do it in different ways depending upon the group, depending upon the technology, depending upon what they need. So it does differ group to group. There's not just one way. I just haven't seen the test tube situation in my experiences.
Wow. So in all of your experiences, have you physically given birth to the hybrid children?
A few times.
Wow.
More times than I can count. But for the most part, that does make healthier hybrids.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the one thing I've found with it is that they do seem to be, when someone goes through the birthing aspect of actually developing the whole gestational time within the womb with the mother, they do tend to be healthier hybrids. They're less prone to mental imbalances. They have a stronger telepathic bond. They have a better understanding of the human, like the being, like the one that's being born has a better composition of being human and ET, because they tend to be more stable. It's really quite fascinating. I absolutely adore it. And I've had the pleasure of meeting so many of my hybrid children now. And the one thing I've found in my last, I started being bred around the time I was 16, so we're looking at 20 years of breeding now. But as I've looked at this, I've realized that they've kept my primary breeding partner for the last 2.5 years or so, someone I've been on-off bred with from the time I was 16, because he and I do have the better combination of ET genetics, and we tend to be able to make healthier hybrids together.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. And it's really intriguing to me that you remember all of this as well.
But I've also asked for my memories to be kept. I also have an easy time telling ETs, please don't mind wipe me, so to speak. I want to remember. Please don't put screen memories over top. I can handle this. And they will, to an extent, test you and see how well you can handle it. If you show tendencies towards not being able to handle it when you're on craft, they know that you're not going to be able to handle it when you go home.
Right.
And so it does depend on who you are and how you approach them in the situations.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Kira has an interesting question too. Have you experienced a race that lives in the ocean and they are crystalline in form?
Well, I haven't experienced a race that lives in the ocean and is crystalline in form, but I have experienced races that are crystalline in form, and I have experienced races that do live in the ocean. I've actually come to learn that dolphin beings in particular are from Sirius, because I met a group of beings that said they were from Sirius that were very humanoid in appearance, very similar to the Mediterranean type people that we see around Greece and Santorini and Italy in that region up towards like the Moroccan type skin tone. That entire region is very similar to how this ET race looked. And they lived alongside on the hillside of the ocean where there were dolphin beings, and they had telepathic communication back and forth with these dolphin beings and considered each other to be equal members of the planet. So a little bit of a half breakup question, but yeah.
Yeah. This is just a very good statement. A lot of stuff happens in the astral.
It does. You should learn how to astral project. A lot of these beings are operating in higher realms of consciousness. For those of you who are so interested in ascension, wanting to move into the 5th dimension, 6th dimension, and higher, you should start astral projecting. All of the beings we're looking at are more psychically capable than us. And that is one thing that's happening with our level of ascension, is we're learning how to better gain grasps and control over these psychic abilities. And learning how to control yourself in the astral is part of that. It's very important if you want to have really authentic contact with them. If you're not having physical contact, astral contact is a great way to go.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Okay. Wendigo, Bigfoot, Skinwalkers, how do they fit into this story?
I'm sorry, I don't know what a Wendigo is. Bigfoot are multidimensional beings. The beings that are at the Skinwalker Ranch are also multidimensional beings, so things that can go in between this dimensional phase of reality and the vibrations close to us, or the dimensions close to us. Both beings appear to be able to come and go as they please. They're both very psychic beings. The Bigfoot, in my experience, have been more peaceful, very kind-based. Clearly, the Skinwalker ones are not. So this leans back into the aspect that we talked about previously, where there's a lot of gray when it comes to this component, where these beings aren't just good or bad. So I'm losing my voice.
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, but when we're looking at this, Bigfoot are more natural to the earth than we are. I believe they have been here longer than we have. And so a lot of them do not choose to interact with the majority of humans because of the way those humans interact with everything. They do work a lot with elementals. So elementals, of course, are everything from your fairies, your pixies, your sprites. They are your not salamanders in the sense of like the little lizard, but salamanders as in the fire spirits. Same with your sylphs, which are the water spirits. They do interact with all the different types of beings that are out there, which a lot of people tend to forget about. They think that it's just old stories from our great grandparents and back, but these are beings that actually are going between the different dimensions back and forth. I don't know a lot about skinwalkers. I've only watched one documentary on Skinwalker Ranch, and I felt really bad for the people and the animals that lived on that property.
But it is a fascinating property. They have so many different types of phenomena happening all at once, which is really fascinating, because I love to see what is the connection between all of it, because I know there is certainly a connection. You know, they've had people that's seen portals open up and beings walk out. They've seen shadow figures in some of the abandoned housesteads. They've seen UFOs. They've had obviously cattle mutilations, which is horrible. But they've had so many different things on one spot. It's fascinating to me.
But with a lot of locations like that, where you see such diversity of the type of beings coming forward, it is often where we have multiple vortexes coming into play, as though the ley lines are intersecting is a very common reason for that as well, because it's a buildup of earth and dimensional energy in one location.
Yeah. Can you talk briefly on what ley lines are?
Well, ley lines are just energetic lines within the earth. So if you look at the earth itself, of course, we have natural grid line patterns similar to how we have a chakra system. The earth has its own version of chakra systems, where some are minor lines where there's not as much energetic flow going along them, and others are major lines where we see a stronger aspect of vibrational energy flowing through. We've all been to one sacred site or another where we're like, wow, you can feel the energy of this place, whether it's in the woods and you can feel like the most serene, incredible energy ever, and you feel alive and charged while being there, or some of the sacred sites around the planet where we see a lot of our things such as pyramids or castles or things of that nature, which can actually help to harness the energy and to amplify it upwards and outwards. That's very common as well. And that's one thing that I've noticed with this, is that a lot of the ETs do tend to choose more power lines where they choose to like to connect to people.
Yeah. Is that why ETs are so attracted to our nuclear facilities as well?
To an extent, more so they just don't want for us to actually cause more harm to the universe or onto our planet, and that's why they're trying to stop any form of nuclear problems from coming forward. They really don't appreciate that kind of technology.
Do they use well, do they use nuclear energy in any way? Not necessarily weaponry, but the energy.
Not that I'm aware of. I know a lot of them use magnetic energy, where it's like they're causing polar opposites within the vibrational fields. Some of them do have more crystalline energy that they use for their craft, but for the most part, I'm sorry, they don't tend to show me that. I tend to interact more with beings than see tech.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Excalibur wants to know, I love the name. Whenever I try and meditate, once I start to get deep into meditation, I see a white flash and my body spasms, which knocks me out of the meditation. Any idea what causes that reaction?
That sounds more likely to be a being that you're interacting with that's sending you back into your body. Because if you're having a white flash coming forward, it could be as you're starting to project out of your body, which is when you're moving into that white flash energy. If your body spasms, it could be something like an attachment knock you back in, it could be an implant knocking you back in, or even a block that's actually preventing you from moving forward. So if you have a past life block where you were persecuted for going into things like the deeper levels of witchcraft, healing, any of that, it could actually cause you to have blocks in this lifetime, which could make you have fear and anxiety around moving forward. If you want to do it, start a routine with your meditation, ask your guides to help you, and just kind of push through it. So if you get knocked back into your body, try it again because you can get past that block. It does take practice. Yes, some ETs do have weapons. The reptilians do have a lot of different weaponry that they end up using. A lot of theirs does tend to be more focused on the mental manipulation, which can be a little bit stressful. So when we're looking at it all around us, we actually have a lot of subliminal messaging that's all around us. One thing that I'm sure all of you have noticed is in the last 10 years, pardon me, there's a huge vibratory shift that's happened. We can all feel a lot more anxiety, stress, feelings of uncertainty, and that does have to do with some of the technology that they're using to try to maintain power still, unfortunately. Some of the, like, if you think about it, I want you to understand beings such as Pleiadians, which are on the same dimensional plane and capability as reptilians in a lot of ways. They aren't just peace, love, and light. They are very love-based, very consciously focused, but they are still able to protect themselves, and that's why they've been able to escape having their colonies and their planets from being taken over by the reptilians, is because they have the technological capabilities and advantages to do so. I find it very naive when I am encountering other people on the internet or TikTok who are saying Pleiadians are all peace, love, and light, and that's it. I'm like, they are, but they're also quite formidable as enemies as well. So it is a bit of a naive perspective. Beings like the Mantises, I haven't noticed weaponry with. They've never showed me any. I don't see any with the Greys. A lot of beings don't tend to show me weapons. So.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, you and I were talking about this yesterday too. And I agree. I think a lot of them do have weapons. It would only make sense because they do need to defend themselves. You know, the universe is large. They may not know every species in the universe, and every species is not. There are species that are going to be hostile, and they need to be able to defend themselves. So why wouldn't they have weapons? In my opinion.
And that's one of the best weapons that you can have, is to have protective shields around yourself. A good defense is much better than a strong offense, something to be able to keep yourself safe. And so that's why you'll see a lot of these beings, as much as they would love to help humanity at this time, they don't want to step into us too quickly and to come forward too quickly, because so many of us are in a state of fear. As that one person mentioned earlier tonight, how this does sound nuts, and I can see how it does sound nuts. And if you look at the average person, if you were to have even Pleiadian ships come down and land at every major city center, you'd still have a phenomenal amount of people that show up with guns to shoot these beings, even though they have no intention of harm towards us.
It's true. We are definitely a hostile species, for sure. I wouldn't come down here. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I can understand that.
All right. So Jennifer wants to know, how do your MK Ultra experiences tie into all of this?
Sure. So I ended up going through the aspect of MK Ultra because of my MyLab experiences. I started having MyLab experiences when I was in elementary school. And one of the things that I found is that they start very young when it comes to sexual abuse. And what that means in this aspect is they do end up raping you, because when you are little and you're younger, you're actually able to have your mind better fractured without your mind breaking, which means you compartmentalize your brain into different alters or different perspectives of who you are. And what this looks like is, how can I explain this nicely? You'll end up having typically someone who's close to you, but not too close to you. So it's not normally one of your parents. It's normally someone that is there as an opportunity. So in my case, I grew up with the first several years of my life. My parents were in the military, and that makes it very easy for my lab situations to get in there and have either a close family friend or someone that is having a relationship with one of the parents type thing, be able to have access to the children and sexually assault them. And so they don't necessarily have to take you on craft. I do have a lot of periods of missing time when I was a kid, when I was very little. And I know they started to fracture my mind at that point. It was from there that we look at the MK Ultra aspect, I started to go through what's known as kitten training. And so it was when I hit about 13 that I actually went from being no interest in boys, no interest in sex, no interest in any of that, to after one experience, suddenly being very interested and very fascinated by all of that. And I look back at that time, that's when they started having more of that sexual abuse happening right before I went over to the aspect of menstruation, even though they had assaulted me when I was very small. That was to make the altars. And from there, I started going through the aspect of my training when it came to the psychic aspect of dealing with it's almost like your squad or your group of who you work with to go through a lot of these training scenarios. When it went from there is I started to actually have these really weird perceptions coming to my mind for someone who is being raised Catholic. At the time, I was like, I don't care who I marry. If they're able to provide for me, I don't care how young they are. I don't care what mentality they have. I don't care how mean they are to others. As long as they're good to me and they provide for me, then I didn't care, because there was these weird thoughts that they will inject into your mind to try to desensitize you to your light. It tries to actually take that empathy aspect away from you and to actually remove it, which is disconnecting me from my divine feminine and disconnecting me from what I was starting to be taught by the Pleiadians. Because what was happening is I was still being abducted by ETs all the way through, and because the Pleiadians started doing the school on craft when I was around 10, maybe 12, somewhere in there. And because of that, they were learning that I was being taught about consciousness, the interconnection of all things, the empathic capability. What the My Labs wanted to do is to make sure that I would actually teach them that information that I was being taught, but still be used as a viable asset to them. And what that meant was regurgitating the information I was learning from the Pleiadians and then going through aspects of a lot of it is sexual abuse, and then handling. A handler is someone that actually mentally, emotionally, verbally really changes your self-worth. It really changes the way that your thought patterns work and actually makes it so you become reliant upon those people. My first handler that I became really aware of was the general, who is now, I believe, in his late 60s, appears to be American. He is in more of the army type capacity, whereas this really deep pea green type outfit, always has a clean shaven face. His hair is kind of in a slight buzz cut type appearance. He's the one that I know has been a very strong handler for me all the way through, from being very young all the way through to now. And he is the one that also passed me over to being into the capacity of, sorry, it's going to be really blunt here, but the aspect of being used for sex in part of the SSP when I was going through that with my 20 and back, where they would exchange these colored crystals, in particular these blue crystals, for sex with these different people, and where I was, in essence, being pimped out as well towards some of these people, more so of higher positions rather than your general soldiers, but still a very hard thing to talk to people about and to connect to. Mostly, how can I explain this? You're not going to be easily be able to find out all of your memories as to the process of doing it, because they are better at clouding that and hiding that away than anything else. They are very good at gatekeeping how these processes are done. And the problem that I've had with it is when I look at these aspects, it's hard for me not to look at them and have breakdowns. I've had more breakdowns in the last 2 years, as a lot of those memories have come forward than anything else. And that's part of the reason why I haven't responded to emails this year or really gotten back to people when they've texted me looking for readings and what have you, is the amount of PTSD I have looking at the beings that I work with trying to keep me safe and trying to deal with the healings, and the amount of times that I've been used for my psychic capabilities and how useful I am when it comes to things like sex. It's traumatizing. It's honestly traumatizing to look at that and know that I have children and that my children are going through my lab experiences as well. Look at them going, okay, so at what age have you been hurt? At what age will you be going through these things? And so I know that's kind of tying into the question, but still kind of going around it. But there's a lot of parts of it I'm not really comfortable talking to people about. I'm sorry.
You're right. No, it's totally fine. That's understandable. I'm so sorry that you went through that.
Thank
It's
you.
horrific.
Yeah.
So people who've had MyLab experiences, is that also familial? Do you tend to do you think your children have had MyLab experiences? Is it run in the family?
Does typically run in families. It tends to run in bloodline families. A lot of us do tend to have families that are in the military, whose parents are also contactees, who end up either having contact while they're doing their stints in the military and get discovered that way. And then it kind of ties in, and any children that come from them get abducted as well to make sure that they're on top of who's having contact. They are very curious about which ETs are following what bloodlines, what their interactions are with these humans, what they want from the humans, what they're teaching them, what they're showing them. So when I've been shown how to fly various ET craft and how to interact with them, how to communicate with all these beings, what the beings want when they're teaching me how to give readings to people, when the beings are teaching me how to understand energy and the hybrid aspect, all of that information when I go into a MyLab situation, quite often I'll find myself sitting across a table from either the general or some of my other handlers, and you won't want to, but they change your state of consciousness to being in such a state because of those alters like we talked about earlier, where you will regurgitate everything that you have seen, that you have sensed, that you have felt, and you start to wonder how much of your life you can actually keep private from anyone, because you have these human beings able to do that. So it does run in bloodlines. If you are in MyLab and you have children, well, guess what? Your kids are going to be MyLabs too, and same with your grandkids.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, it
Wow.
is.
If I have had those experiences, I don't remember them, thankfully.
Yeah.
I wouldn't doubt that I do.
If
Based on
you
my
don't, but if you don't remember them, if that's a can of worms you don't want to get into, don't even explore it a little bit. Because
No, I'm good with that. For sure.
yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Let's change the subject to something a little lighter. We'll let you have a breather.
Yes.
Leviathan ship considered an alien ship. I'm not sure what Leviathan ship is. I don't know if you know that.
Okay.
But like a living being with some kind of intelligence. And do some of them need human or alien bring as a host live inside of them? I think I understand what he's saying. I've heard that there are some ships that are almost biological in nature, and the beings inside connect with them in some manner. I'm not sure exactly how it works. And so it's almost like a symbiotic relationship between the pilot and the craft.
Agree. I full-heartedly agree with that component. I haven't been into the Leviathan ship, so I don't know how that one works. I have been in a lot of different types of craft, though, many of which do seem to have some sort of energetic connection between the craft itself and who's allowed to pilot it. The smaller ones are the ones, or the smaller craft that I've been taught how to fly typically are what's known as transport or passenger ones, where you have maybe between 2 and 6 people normally, never very big, both in MyLab and extraterrestrial, but I've never been taught how to fly bigger ones. They don't give you that opportunity, so I don't know how ones like Leviathan would work. I'm sorry, but I don't.
So did you say you had the opportunity to fly some craft?
Yes, I have.
That's amazing. What was that like?
It's all right. The one thing that I found is that there are a few types that I've been in most commonly. Some can be very small. They can actually go to being about the size of a baseball, and they can get a heck of a lot, or not baseball, pardon me, a basketball. Clearly, I'm good at sports. And they'll actually end up getting a lot bigger. It was in one of my MyLab situations with a young man who was, from what I believe to be of ET descent, who had found one of these crafts who was trying to get home, and it was more of a light craft. So a light craft means it's comprised of energetic vibrations and frequencies. What this does is it actually is more of a consciousness craft, very similar to this Leviathan one that you're speaking of, although I'm not certain as to how much the two have in common. And what I have found with it is that when this young man and I went into the craft, it didn't get very big. Like it's quite round, big enough that 2 people could get in and sit. This child was maybe 10 years old, not very old. There was enough for a seat, like a floating seat for him, a floating seat for me. And you could see through any direction of the craft with your consciousness focused towards it, but it didn't have a control panel like you would expect with human tech. And the door actually raised like a hatch. Hi, Ange. But the one thing that I found with this is that when he put his hand on something ahead of us, I can't remember if it was a dash or something similar, and that
Yeah.
was how he controlled it, and he showed me that I could do it too. But when I was about to go use the craft with him, this gentleman came in behind us, my loved one, who tried to put his gun in, and then I had to pull the gun in because he kept trying to stop us from closing the door. He's a giant pain in the butt, which is okay. I know it's technical terms, obviously. Thank you. But one thing that I have noticed is that with some of the other ones, like I've gone on smaller ET craft, especially in the last couple of years, where I'll go on with 2 or 3 other beings and they'll be flying us very low. And they will show me how a lot of the craft, they don't have steering wheels like how we do. A lot of the times it's done through connecting your consciousness and your psychic abilities, runs through your arms and your chakras into your arms, and you have your hand on something and it's instantaneous when it comes to choosing directions. It's a lot faster. And it's kind of like the size of like oh god, smaller than a Toyota 4Runner. It's not even the size of like a Santa Fe. I'm sorry, I'm trying to go through vehicles in my head trying to find something about the right size and dimension. It's maybe the size of Corolla, a Toyota Corolla type thing, like very small. But a lot of these craft, they're only smaller ones I'm ever allowed to drive because they find me to be too inattentive, which sounds bad. But compared to them, we are inattentive, no matter how good of an ET or a normal driver we are. Pardon me.
Well, yeah, I think, God, okay, so I love airplanes. And so this to me, I would be like, what? I'm going to fly?
Yeah, I get that one. I have been allowed to partially fly one black triangular craft before when I was in there with one male who was of a MyLab handler capacity. And thanks, Dave. But the one thing that I found with it is that actually had a steering wheel, and that's how I knew it was human tech and a human I was beside, even though we're both wearing all black. I knew that it was a human because of how primitive and how there's dials and buttons with the tech still. They may have some really good craft, but that's not what every MyLab personnel is allowed to fly and use.
Yeah. So the craft that you were flying, I'm so sorry. Dave wants me to tell you that Pascal is listening.
Oh, hi, Pascal. Haven't talked to him in a couple of years. Hope you're doing well.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So the craft that I'm just going to tell everybody this. I'm going to tattle on Dave. He was typing so we have access to the same account because it's the one that broadcasts. And all of a sudden I'm seeing under, like Spaced Out Radio, someone typing in French, someone saying things. And I'm just kind of like saying to Dave, I think someone hacked our account. And he's like, no, that was me.
Well, that's good. I'm glad it's okay.
I was like, what is going on? Oh my goodness. That's hilarious. So now I totally went on a tangent and forgot what I was just
We'll take it. I like the happiness. A nice quick energy lift up. We'll take it.
Yes. Let's get a little bit happier energy. I remember what I was going to say. So, have you ever had any of the ETs let you fly their craft, or have they shown you how their craft flies, or because that's what I'd be like, let's see the controls. What's happening here?
Well, only one has been willing to outside that one little boy who felt like he wasn't from here. And that was a variety of hybrid that I met earlier this year. We're flying over the water. There's 2 of them in the front. I'm sitting in the back talking to them. And I was super curious because we're flying like maybe a couple feet above the water. And it looked like we're flying over the ocean. I'm like, this is so exciting. Where are we going? What are we doing? I'm just like this annoying little child half the time when they go into craft. So it's probably like having a 6-year-old, but a happy 6-year-old. And so I was curious, and I leaned forward and I touched his chair, and it's like the aura of the being spiked. I'm like, what did I do wrong? He's like, nothing, just be careful. Don't push downward, or we're going to be going downward. I'm like, oh, okay. And it took my hand. It's like, here. And I have my hand on. It's like, we're going this way. And so it directs your consciousness where to go. And it's like, okay, so we're going this way. It's like a kid sitting on their parents' lap type thing, driving. I'm pretty sure I wasn't allowed to have any real control, but it felt like I was being allowed to help a little bit when it came to the craft. So that was a lot of fun.
That is awesome.
I
want to go fly through space like that.
I didn't get space. I got the ocean at night. That is not as interesting.
Right? Yeah, come on. Let's go fly by some sort of like nebula or something amazing.
Saturn. Maybe not Saturn, actually. It's a bad idea. Uranus could be fun.
Yeah, or Neptune. I think Neptune.
Ooh, Neptune. Yeah, that'd be pretty.
Okay. Excalibur has a question. Are there any, and I love this, are there any Muse type beings you can invoke or request help from?
Goodness, yeah. Yeah, you can ask help from any type of being. If you're looking for, depends on what you want muse or inspiration with. If you're looking for creativity when it comes to architecture, ooh, Pleiadians be great. They're also great when it comes to music. They're great when it comes to any form of creative ideal. If you're looking for beings that are great when it comes to the healing component, mantises know the body like the human body like none other. And same if you want to help animals, mantises are great for that as well. If you're looking for a muse to help you to gain strength and confidence, capability, Reptilians are really good for that. If you're wanting for ones that are very good with helping you understand technology, then I would recommend a lot of the Greys. The Greys can actually be very good when it comes to understanding how things work and how to put them all together. And if you're trying to make something on a really limited budget, then the Greys are great for that as well. Whereas if you're looking at wanting to better connect towards like animals, you're finding you're having problems with like your cats, your dog, the Lyran beings, the cat Lyrans can be really great for that. But we're also skipping all the different spirit guide type beings you can connect to. I mean, you can invoke any major deity throughout history to help you with something. For instance, if you want to change your house and your home, or you want to make your home a more harmonious place, Vesta is really great. If you want to get into practicing magic, I love Hecate. If you really want to get into the aspect, I know, right? She's so good.
Yeah, she's awesome.
She is. If you want to get into the aspect of really having more gentle, compassionate communication with people, Jesus is fantastic. I mean, really, there's a whole bunch of different beings you can communicate with. If you are having problems with your garden, call upon fairy beings and elemental beings because they will help you to have the most amazing garden. And same if you want to have more wild animals come around as well. They're great for that too. So depends on what you're looking for a muse and inspiration in.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that. Like, I've never thought of them as muses, but that, I mean, that makes total sense.
Yeah, I agree. It really does help, doesn't it? So
yes, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Poor Jennifer. She's the one who asked you the question about the my lab experiences.
That's
I think
okay.
she feels very bad.
Hey, don't feel bad. Don't, please. If I wasn't comfortable talking about it, I would edit what I'd be willing to talk about. So don't worry about it. It's not a biggie.
That's exactly what I just said. So Jim says, I would be very inspired if I got to drive the UFO. How do you work something like that out? He wants to finagle his way into flying a UFO.
I love it. What I recommend, Jim, is the quickest way is actually develop a relationship with a certain ET race that you have a strong connection with. So let's say you have a very strong connection with the Sirius star system. Start astral projecting. Start projecting yourself to the Sirius star system. After you don't want to fly by Saturn, we'll get to that in 1 minute. But when you're wanting to actually start to fly ET craft, you can either learn how to fly them astrally or you learn how to fly them physically. If you develop a relationship with a certain race of beings and tell them this is something you're really interested in doing, they can help to make that happen. But most of them will not see you physically very easily. That's why I recommend developing relationships astrally first and then asking for the physical contact to come forward or the astral contact to come forward where you can do these things. Very important. Saturn is very dangerous. When it comes to the aspect of Saturn, that's actually where a lot of our matrix that's around the planet is coming from, is from that direction and being hit off the moon as well. So don't astral project to the moon. Don't astral project to Saturn. Not a great idea. Chances are if you go to Mars, you're going to get really stressed out. So I don't recommend going to Mars either. Venus could be nice this time of year. Go check out Venus. Maybe go check out a different solar system. Something a bit easier.
Oh my God. So why not the moon? Why?
Okay, the moon has a lot of ET races that are already on there. And they don't necessarily like humans suddenly coming onto their space and their territory and looking around. We also do have some black ops that do tend to be on the moon as well. Some military that is up there that do have certain contracts in place. And if you do astral project up there, they're going to follow you home unless you know how to camouflage your aura. And you're good at it, unless you know how to camouflage your appearance through using things like a glamour, you're not going to be able to hide yourself very well. You have to hide your energetic footprint, you have to hide your physical appearance, and then you have to do what's known as bilocating, trilocating, or quadlocating, which is when your consciousness projects into multiple locations at once. Because if you get scared, you're like, shit, I just saw something scary and I just jump back into my body. Well, guess what? They're going to follow that lovely little stream of energy you left from the moon all the way back to your bed and be like, gotcha. We know who we're going to start abducting because we know that one knows how to consciously project. And that's a problem.
Yeah. Anytime I astrally project, and I don't know why, I just started doing this at some point in time. So everybody talks about surrounding themselves in white light as a protection, right? Which I think on Earth, yes. But when I'm astrally projecting, I actually surround myself in black. So almost to become invisible, so they can't see inside, just like impenetrable black.
And that's really common. Like one thing I find is that if you're teaching, and I don't like to use this term, but baby witches, teaching them the aspect of white light, golden bubble, grounding cord, it's like teaching your ABCs with CPR. But when you actually start to really get to know your energetic system, and like for instance, if I have a lot of purple in my aura, well, the opposite on the color wheel of purple is closer to something like red. So if I want to neutralize my energy, I'm going to pull more of that red energy around me to make it more neutralized. And same with really shifting up the vibratory colors of what's around you. And that's one thing that I learned from the Pleiadians is when we're seeing too much of one color in the aura, learning how to counterbalance it with other colors to help make things more harmonized again is very important. And that's one thing I notice with people when they astral project into your space, because sometimes beings will do it, but they're more clever with it. If you see a being astral projecting into your space, like an extraterrestrial and multi-dimensional, it's going to cloak its aura. You're going to be like, there's like an invisible outline, kind of like a mirage type appearance moving around the house. And be like, well, that's not right. And if you telepathically say, I can see you, or you look at them and be like, I can see you, they'll typically stop and you need to leave. Most of them will leave. Whereas a human, they will typically show up looking like a black outline. And that tends to be completely different because our cloaking mechanism isn't the same. We're not as capable as it. But one being explained it to me, a variety of like this whitey kind of gray. And she, I believe it was a she, ended up saying to me that in order for humans to actually, or for anything to be able to completely be invisible in its location, it has to take the vibration of what's around it and to maintain that sense of neutrality constantly within the consciousness, where it's in an observer type mode, not a reactor mode. And that's the problem that most humans have. We're always in reaction. We're like, oh my goodness, or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm bad for it. You're bad for it. We're all bad for it.
Yeah.
And because of that, we can't actually maintain that invisible aspect very well because it's like the toroidal flow. You're pulling the energy from what's around you into your chakra systems, going down all the way through to your feet and kind of like maintain that constant energetic circulation all the way around. But most people can't do that. And that's why we don't tend to cloak as easily.
See, now that's a challenge to me. I'm going to figure out how to do it.
You can teach me because I want to learn.
Okay. Once I figure it out, I will let you know.
I don't care if it's 6 lifetimes from now. Still teach me.
Right. Oh my gosh. See, I hear something like that and I'm like, I'm going to figure that out.
Yeah, you can.
I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm weird. Ozzy says, what do ETs do for entertainment? I love that.
Depends on the ET. Some of them actually like to observe Earth, which sounds kind of ridiculous, but they like
we're like a reality show. I've said that before and I stand by it.
A bad one. Like we're like The Bachelor or something ridiculous and embarrassing.
Here's a little secret about me, everyone. I love reality shows. It's the one time I can get my brain to stop thinking because I'm going, did you just see what happened? I love it. It's the only time my brain stops. Every other time, it's constantly going.
I could see that. One thing that they've shown me over and over is that a lot of them do actually enjoy projecting their consciousness to different locations. They like to do a lot of exploration. A lot of them are in a state where they really enjoy learning. They don't necessarily have TV like we do. They do have viewing screens where they can view what's happening on different planets. They do have things very equivalent to Skype where they can interact with other beings that are like us, or like themselves, pardon me, where it's like, okay, I'm from Lyra and I'm a Lyran cat being, but I'm currently over towards Mars and doing this exploration mission. I'm going to call home and see how everyone's doing and see how the cubs are doing, because they do consider their babies to be cubs. Very cute, by the way, very sweet. There's a variety of grays on the moon. There's also humans on the moon. There are also tall whites on the moon. Beyond that, I don't know what else on the moon. Those are the ones I know about. So, yeah, a lot of stressful energy, but very interesting.
Oh, gotta release that.
I know, right? One thing that I've found with a lot of the beings is they tend to be in the service to other mode more often than not. So they don't necessarily have the same 9 to 5 like we have. They don't have the 8-hour workday. So a lot of their time is spent helping other people, helping other beings on the craft. That is very important to them. And so when I talked earlier about the larger craft that have things like the larger gardens where they can go and do meditating, or sometimes they'll go help it with the small hybrids that are there, or the children. They will go take care of the plants or meditate under them. That is very common as well. They do tend to have a lot of projects on the go at once, especially when they're away from home.
Awesome. Okay, I have a question, and we're going to go on another tangent. Okay. So it's somewhat related. So you see beings all the time. Do you ever see like spirits, as in your deceased loved ones, or maybe someone you don't know? How can you tell the difference? Because I know that oftentimes ETs can project themselves as your deceased loved ones to make you feel more comfortable. How do you tell the difference between that and your actual, because you, I think, mentioned at one point in time, you used the example, your grandmother sitting at the edge, like the foot of your bed. And to me, that really struck a chord, because I remember very, very clearly, and I was probably only 2 or 3, my grandmother sitting at the foot of my bed. And the next morning I said something to my mom. Actually, it was my great grandmother. And she got like a ghost white, and she was just like, oh, she passed away last night. But so I've always just assumed it was her. But then when you said that, I was kind of like, was it an ET, not my grandma? I mean, I think it was my grandma.
That's more like your grandma, yeah.
Yeah.
So you have to look this way. If it's someone that you know, so for instance, in this case, your grandma, if it felt like how your grandma felt when she was alive, it's probably her. But if you have a being that is masquerading as your grandma because they need to take you into an abduction and go through a health scenario and be like, okay, we notice that she's having some issues, her implants are picking up that she has some sort of infection that's forming, let's take care of it now before it becomes a big problem. In which case they could project the image of your grandma into your mind, but then the being itself will not have the same auric vibration or feel as your grandmother had. With your grandmother, you might have had a feeling of like love. You might have had the feeling of like, okay, she and I would read books together, and there's a sense of like always smelling roses by her or cookies or whatever. And so when you feel her, you'd feel those memories of those experiences coming forward in the auric field. Whereas that being wouldn't be able to replicate all of that. It really just wouldn't. It could scan your mind and see them, but it'll see all the other memories too. And so it won't put together the proper combination of energy to be able to pull off both. And so with these beings, quite often we'll end up feeling them, be like, okay, this doesn't feel like them, and therefore it's honestly not them. It could just be either another deceased person that's masquerading them. It could be an extraterrestrial. It could be a multidimensional. You have to really narrow it down and start paying attention to the vibration to figure out whether it feels like them, yes or no. Does it feel kind to me? Yes or no. Does it feel dangerous? Yes or no. And it's kind of like breaking every question down to a yes or no component. And that's the easiest way for people who are psychically just really starting to learn, is they have to break it down to yes and no answers. That's the most important thing. From there, once you get a strong foundation of yes and no, you can expand on those answers and talk to your angels and guides with it. But that gut feeling we get where it doesn't quite settle right, you have to trust that. That's very important.
Awesome. Yep. Angela's agreeing. Discernment.
So important. Yeah.
Yes. Interesting. Okay, hold on a second. Oh, I know what I want to talk to you about. Auras. Okay. Can everyone learn to see auras?
Yes, very much so. Auras are actually very easy to learn how to see. The easiest ways you can do it is you can either learn through seeing the auras of plants, which is probably your easiest, or cats, if you have a lovely cat who's willing to be your volunteer that can stay still for like 10 minutes. We're looking at, do you have a plant? I do. So let's say you're 6 feet away from this plant. If you were to relax your eyes and to look up at this part here on the plant, under like natural sunlight, preferably, not like artificial light, like the rain light and everything else you got going on here, that doesn't help. You'll actually start to notice that you'll see a slight discoloration occurring between the plant and the wall. I recommend clear, like walls that are just like one color, not textured, not wallpaper, not like ombre, like one of my kids' rooms, none of that. That's too hard to make out the aura against.
Yeah.
You can start there. Or if you and I were like, let's say we're sitting across from one another like we are right now. See how behind my head, how there's like all this like clear area, like it's like nice and fairly easy. There's nothing behind to distract. That'd be so much easier for you to start seeing my aura than if I were a beginner. Yeah, but you're fine. I can see that, no problem. But I've also practiced enough times.
Right.
Whereas when you're just learning, if you have that plain background, it makes it easier because you can actually focus on what's coming, and you would actually get yourself into a relaxed state, feet flat on the ground, arms like just kind of in a natural position, like taking a loose coat, like really tight clothing, loosen it so it's comfy, and you just like gently kind of stare above someone's head. And the reason why I say above their head is if you are looking at their face, you're going to stare at their face.
Right.
It's human nature to make eye contact and read lips and everything else. And that's kind of the problem. So what you would do is you take like quite a few deep breaths over the next 2 minutes. You're going to zone out and stare at the top of my head. And while you're doing that, you'd actually start to see a slight glow that comes around, a slight discoloration. Keep doing the deep breaths, keep kind of staring. Nice charcuterie board, love it.
I know, right? She's gonna watch
Making me
Bravo with
hungry.
us.
Nice. I love that. But what you're going to do is you're going to start relaxing more and more, and it's actually going to shift the way that you're seeing the energy behind. And what it does is it actually changes. Your eyes will actually start to relax, and your clairvoyance starts to come forward with your physical eyes, not your third eye. Your third eye is your impressions, your memories, information, and downloads with claircognizance, like we talked about earlier. But we're going to develop your third eye and your physical eyes with this aspect. And so what you would do is you'll take a good friend and you'll take turns just kind of staring at each other. And you can either talk or you can listen to music. I do recommend like just like some light conversations about something not important, because that does really work. And the more you practice it, the quicker you can get at seeing them. Like it's very common for me in the morning to go into my bathroom and to look in the mirror and be like, okay, my aura's lopsided. Let's energetically push it over. Or, oh, wow, it's really wonky. I probably had an encounter last night. Things like that. Starting to take note of things. It takes practice, but it's worth doing.
So I had a question pop into my mind, and you're probably going to laugh based on our conversation yesterday. My question was, how do you know if you're right?
Well, practice. So for instance, like let's say you can go out and buy a book on understanding auras and aura colors, or you can go on, I don't recommend things like TikTok. I don't. Well, for the most part, because for the most part, it's inaccurate.
Yeah.
Because it's people that don't understand what they're talking about. But a lot of the books that are out there do have some very basic and consistent knowledge about the understanding of auric colors. And so, for instance, let's say I go into the bathroom and I notice that I look at my aura in the morning, I'm like, wow, that is a tremendous amount of lopsided deep purple on this side. And it's like a nightshade purple over here. And I've got like this really weird, like greeny color going over my chest and my abdomen. I'm like, huh, okay, I feel ET energy about me. Oh, no wonder, a telepathic energy all over my head right here. Oh, all the green. Okay, they must have done something healing wise on my body. So when you start to be like, okay, so green, heart chakra, healing, purple, psychic, claircognizant, crown chakra, third eye chakra, ear chakra, stuff like that, you can start to get to know what the colors mean. And it gives you that kind of back and forth understanding to kind of discern it a bit.
So now once you learn how to see auras, like, do you see everyone's auras all the time?
No, I see them probably about a third of the time though.
Okay.
I can relax myself at any point and be able to look at people's auras. But after a certain point, you start realizing how many people are hypersexually focused and about things that you don't necessarily want to realize. It's like, okay, wouldn't have been my first choice like that, but okay. And you actually stop invading people's privacy.
That's hilarious. That's true. Based on like your reading yesterday, you can tell a lot about a person from their auras.
Well, so I used to do it a lot more, and then my kids started to go to school, and I started to realize how many pedophiles are out there. And then I really started to kind of keep it to myself. I will look at anyone's aura if I know my kids are going to be going to their kid's birthday party or have a play date or a sleepover. It's like, we'll have sleepovers and play dates at our house, but we won't go to their house. Kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. Gosh. Yeah.
So sorry for making that heavy, but
yeah. That is, wow.
It's awkward. And then you'll start to notice, like, if you start looking at auras and you'll start to realize, like, who has crushes on who and who's more likely to be unfaithful and everything else. It's like, okay, you are reacting like you may be with this person, but your auras say you hate each other, even though you're putting on the facade of liking each other. It's like, then you start to know too much about people and then you have a hard time not saying it. And it's just easier not to.
Wow. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna give it a go and see.
Like,
everything I see is always just like with my third eye. I never see things with my eyeballs. So
take practice. Okay, I'll teach you one weekend. It'll be really fun.
Yes. I want to know.
Good.
You can tell a person's nature by looking, Dave says. Yes.
Yeah.
So,
yes, you can. Yeah. But a lot of people already get that, David, through their energetic awareness of their empathic abilities or their clairsentient abilities, where that person walks into the room and you already have an energetic reaction to, I really like that person, or, oh my God, I want nothing to do with that person, or I feel like that person lies, or I feel like that person is really good with animals, or whatever it is. We get these intuitive information from people already, but mine's just more visual.
So do you think, someone like me who gets that information almost instantaneously about people, will that affect how I see their aura?
Not necessarily. It might give you further validation about what it is you're picking up about them and help you to better understand the information you're receiving already. So, for instance, let's say you and I walk into a restaurant, and
Yes.
while we're there, we're looking at people and we're just observing them and getting intuitive information about them. And someone walks in, and automatically you get this feeling of, I can't trust that guy. And let's say for whatever reason, in this blah 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 hyperbolistic scenario, that this person was going to be someone I wanted to introduce you to that was dating. And then you would get this download, and then you'd start looking at their aura and be like, wow, okay, I see a lot of tremendous like deep red around this guy. I see a lot of like this deep crimson. So hypersexual energy, very root chakra based, very living in this material world, because we're looking at all the components we know about the root chakra, because you already have a lot of information about the chakra system. And you'll start to realize, okay, so I'm picking up this, that, and everything about this guy. And you might be like, I don't really trust him. I feel like he's going to cheat on you. And I'm like, no, he's not. You're wrong, blah, blah, blah. And then 6 months later, lo and behold, you were right.
Yeah.
So it's teaching you, sorry for such like I guess in one sense, crass example, but that's what a lot of intuitive information is trusting the multiple sources of information as they come forward.
Wow. That's fascinating.
Yeah,
I mean,
is.
I think the aura is such a fascinating thing. Like I know, and I'm sure you did this as well. When I got my Reiki 1 practitioner attunement, she taught us how to, feel where the aura began away from the body over each of the 7 just kind of main chakras.
Of course.
Yeah. And that alone to me was just fascinating, that you could feel the resistance when you, got to the beginning of the aura. And
oh yeah.
And yeah, I love it. I love it. But I've never seen them, so I want to see them.
One sec.
Bless you.
Coughing.
Oh. Okay, so let me pull up a question while you're taking a moment. Jim wanted to know. Oh, you okay? Okay.
I'm good.
Okay. Jim wants to know, can you read the aura of the ETs you encounter?
Quite often, actually. That's one of the reasons why I've gone through so many, ET encounters, and psychic ET encounters in particular. Because quite often I read ETs and tell them about what's come up in their health, their future, things like that, things they need to look out for. Because that is what my soul has done for multiple lifetimes. On this planet and off this planet, is my soul is in essence an oracle. That is my job. And it sounds like it's a lot of fun, but it's actually really complicated, because sometimes I'll see things that I don't understand. Yeah. And they'll ask me to explain it. I'm like, okay, so I'm seeing this location, and I'm noticing this kind of planet, I'm noticing this kind of being, and I'm seeing this situation unfold. And sometimes it's beautiful, and sometimes it's a really wonderful situation to experience. But other times it can be really stressful, because I won't have that same state of consciousness to understand what it is I'm being exposed to. And so it's like showing a kid a movie, and they're explaining the movie to you. They can only explain from their place of awareness. It's really complicated. All the ETs do have auras. I haven't noticed an overall color pattern within any specific species. And that's part of the reason why I believe they have so much diversity to them in the same way humans do, is I've noticed that it doesn't matter what ET species I'm interacting with, their auras are just as diverse as ours are.
Right.
And that's why I believe that we're so different.
Right.
Yes, auras change all the time. So for instance, David, if you're having a really happy moment, your aura will expand and get bigger. And that's why you feel like when someone is excited and comes into space, you can feel like that energy radiating off of them. And the same thing can be said with when someone's feeling sad. It feels like our aura is kind of like wrapped around us like a cozy little blanket. Same thing. And the one thing that I've noticed is that we'll have colors kind of popping up too. You might have a core base color that you have most commonly, which is when I'm looking at people's auras and I'm reading them, like how when I was first sitting down to talk to you, I'm like, hey, some purple here and pink here and blue here. That's like the overall auric pattern of what you're like emitting at any given time for the most part. You can still have sections coming through of other colors, but they won't be as deep. So the aura is actually done in layers. People think auras are just like, they think everyone's aura is a perfect egg shape. They think everyone has just one color. Most people actually have a lot of colors in their aura. And they tend to be very it's kind of like a kid's coloring half the time, where there's like scratchy parts and parts that are thicker and denser and parts where they didn't go over the crayons quite so heavily, things like that.
Wow. That's amazing.
It's fun.
Okay, so Excalibur, I know the answer to this, but I want to let you answer it. If at times you feel a field around your body that you can cause to expand outward or contract inward, even focusing down to a point, is that an aura or imagination?
It depends on the energy. Like, let's say you're feeling an energy that is your own, and let's say you already play with energetic vibrations already. You can take something else's aura and push it out of your aura, but you have to be able to consciously focus on expanding your aura and solidifying your aura so they cannot come into your aura. Whereas sometimes, if you were to, like, let's say the two of us once again were hanging out. Let's say I was dumping a lot of my emotional baggage on you, all of my energy, all my emotions and experiences on you. You could start to feel very cloudy, heavy, and drained after interacting with me. I'd be like, I feel great after talking to Lynn. This is perfect. We should talk all the time. She's amazing. You'd be like, oh God, she's so yeah. That's how you would feel.
Yeah.
And so what I recommend doing with this is right after, like if you interact with someone who does feel very cloudy, very heavy to you, take time, do a meditation that grounds you and clears your aura, and push all that either into the earth or just release it and get your guides to take care of it, because you shouldn't hold on to other people's energy, or you're going to pick up their thoughts, feelings, and emotions. And it's not worth that.
No, for sure. Because I do that. And it is doo-doo. But so when you say cleanse your aura, can you explain to us how, like the process of doing that, how would one go about that?
Sure, there's a lot of different ways you can cleanse your aura. Traditionally, the Aboriginal people would use things like sage to end up cleansing their aura. Everything from like the Middle Eastern people and the Catholics would use things like incense to help cleanse the aura, because smoke is a very cleansing and energetically cleansing way of doing it. I really enjoy the aspect of surrounding my aura within a liquid golden light vibration and going to my meditation place, stepping into a waterfall where it's pouring this liquid light over top of me and cleansing everything out of my auric field to rebalance it and repair it. There are thousands of different ways you can do it. For those of you who don't practice any, visualizing white light around yourself, putting up that golden bubble just to kind of clear your aura, feeling your aura expand and grow through conscious breath, feeling it being very small with each breath. It gets bigger and stronger, can be very helpful as well. But you can find tons of books on it online, or even at any bookstore to help you learn how to do this. Very easy, but needs to be done daily. That's the most important thing.
So I wonder if that is what, on that Arcturian ship, when I was telling you about that meditation kind of healing chamber, I wonder if that's what that was.
Quite often, yeah. A lot of the ET ships also have crystal healing beds that they use as well, where it's like you're laying on a very large rose quartz crystal, for example, that'll help to naturally align the chakra system, repair the energetic field, and repair some of the minor ailments within the body as well, and raise the vibration.
I'm trying to remember exactly, because it's been several years. I need to take another trip up there. But I do remember it was a small kind of enclosed space, and there were plants in there with me. I absolutely, because I love plants. I mean, you can't see me right now, but I'm surrounded by plants right now.
I believe
There's, I don't think there's no, at least no real ones. Well, there's no sunlight over here. But on this window, I can tell you there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 plants right over there. So I don't know if that was for my benefit, or if they also use because I believe plants do have healing energy. So, was that me projecting the idea of those plants there? Do they use the healing energy of the plants?
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
One thing I found is when I was on contact or in a craft about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, I was walking with a very tall being who felt like he was more reptilian, and we're walking through this. It's almost like some of their gardens are open, like very large fields, like you'd find at a very large park in the city, where you have trees, minor hills, stuff like that, creeks, rivers, so on and so forth. But other ones can actually be more of like their hallways can be lined with plants as well, because it does have a very calming, therapeutic effect. And the hallways have a slight curve to them, where it's kind of like winding like a river. And they do this because the plants actually naturally calm almost all species down and put us into a more harmonized state, a very clear, concise way of being. Once again, it's not just for the human benefit, it benefits them as well.
I love plants, are amazing. Like,
I agree.
Give it up for plants. Like, honestly, I love them. It's like a jungle in here. My kids are like, I'll get another one. And my kids are like, really? Another plant? Like, I can't help it. They're like, I mean, I don't want to say pets, because they're not like pets, but they're like, they have their own like
vibration, and
they're their own little beings, and I love them.
It's funny because you don't really like fairies, but fairies love crystals and they love house plants. They love shiny things. You're like, I don't want to work with them. I'm like, okay.
I know. I say that. You know what it is? Is I've heard of other witches who work with fairies, and they, if you don't, you have to do this daily, and if you don't, then they, like blah blah blah. But in reality, let's get down here. In reality, when my girls were young, we made fairy houses. We had a fairy house in our house. Like, I like fairies. I will admit it. But I haven't worked with fairies.
Well, that's okay. And you don't have to. If you're not feeling compelled or drawn to work with them, don't work with them. Don't force yourself to establish a relationship that you're not feeling energetically compelled to do, or it's a waste of your time and theirs. It's kind of insulting to both parties. So don't do that. Same with ETs. If you don't feel like you want to work with a certain race, but you hear all these good things from everyone else about them, if you don't naturally align with them, they're not going to want to deal with you either. So why bother?
And you know what else? And I'm sure you do this already. But for all the witches in here, because we do have like I said, quite a few witches in our audience. I have started working with my ET contacts when I do my magic.
Of course.
Yeah. And
well,
it's great.
Especially if you're alter, if you're like, for instance, when we get really sick, which does happen on occasion, we do get abducted by them and they do end up coming to take care of ourselves. I will put offerings for them on our altar, like go out and buy them fresh flowers, or I'll put crystals on there or food, be like, hey, thank you. But for some of my ancestor spirits, like some of the family members I have that passed over who helped me with other things, I will put things like a glass of scotch on my altar or a glass of wine or some mead, something that I know would be more of a delicacy they enjoyed. Or even fruit. Yeah,
but it's great. I mean, it's definitely expanded my practice working with the ETs as well. I don't know why I never thought of it before, but it's amazing.
Because we're not taught about the overlap. We're taught that witchcraft has to be completely separate than the energy work, which has to be separate from the ET stuff, which is separate than angels. People think they can't all overlap. It's all very interconnected.
Oh, it's all energy work. It's all energy. Absolutely. Yes. So that's one of the things I always like to explain to younger witches. I don't want to call them baby witches because sometimes people don't like that. I think it's adorable, but I call my daughter, I call her a witchling. So
that's cute. I like that.
She's my little witchling. Even though she's almost 18, she's not little. But I'm constantly telling her, because she's always. And I understand this because in the beginning I was too, focused on using tools such as candles, such as, crystals, anything. I mean, crystals are different because they have their own vibrations and they definitely do contribute. But you know what I'm talking about, the tools of the trade. And I'm always like, yes, those are good to help you focus your intention, but really you have to understand it's coming from you. You're the one that's directing the energy. And so you really don't need any tools. All you need is yourself. And after a while, you get good at just doing like mental magic, really, because that's all it takes. That's all it really is. The tools just help you focus your intent, I think.
Totally agree with you. And that's one thing I came to understand with all this is magic really is just the act of directed energy work. And most people think of magic and they think, well, how can magic exist? And how can the Illuminati exist? And how can these bloodlines exist? And how can there be everything from Satanism to all these other magical practices in place? Plus there be ufologists, just, you've lost me. It's too much Harry Potter land thrown with ETs. It's like, it's all very interconnected.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, magic is just misunderstood science. That's all it is.
I agree. And that's one thing that I found with some of the beings that I work with is you'll find that some are more prone towards doing ritualistic nature to bring about their intention and the things they want. For instance, many of the reptilians are very ritual practice or ritually focused. Whereas when I notice beings like the Pleiadians, when they're trying to gain information about the future, they tend to do it more organically, more focused on self. The Mantis tend to look for the patterns a lot more and look for the nature patterns, whether it's looking at like, okay, what's going on with the cosmos, what's going on with the human overall energetic vibration, a mixture of both scientific and spiritual approach. Whereas it seems like, in my experience, the reptilians seem a lot more focused on the outcome and how to direct the energy to bring forward whatever outcome they want. They can be open to understanding where things are going, but if it's not the direction they want, they tend to be a little more frustrated. That's a nice way to put it.
Yeah.
It's
understandable. If it doesn't go right, all right.
We've
Depends
all had
on how they express that frustration, but Okay.
I agree.
Angel says that I've had this question for quite a while for her, and it does sound like an interesting one. Do you do circadian rhythm bonding with your hybrid babies?
Is circadian rhythm bonding where you have them on your chest, your heartbeats are synchronizing? In which case, yes. If that is what it is, I love doing that with my hybrids. A couple of my favorite hybrids that have come out that I've given birth to, who are now children of my own, and my next two children that are already going through hybridization time and time again with me, getting their bodies perfect and their energy bodies perfect. As soon as I give birth to them, which is always vaginal deliveries, by the way, never medicated. They don't seem to give us any of that.
Oh,
Which is
no. They don't
unfortunate.
give you anything for it? Come on now.
Nope, nothing.
Can't they take that pain away? That's not cool.
They don't for some reason. Like, as you know, they can do certain things where they can actually pinch you right here and it kind of changes your focus. But there must be some sort of switch with them when they're doing that where you don't necessarily acknowledge the, I guess, the desire to push or the need to push when they do stuff like that. So all of my deliveries on craft have been unmedicated and more consciously focused.
Wow.
But I do find after I give birth to my hybrid children, quite often I'm allowed to put them on my chest for a few minutes and I get to look in their eyes. And it's actually quite a beautiful experience. I've gotten to see a few of them more recently, which have been different species and just gray hybrid children. That's when I was talking earlier about my reptilian boys. I don't remember getting to give birth to them, but I do know that they were mine when I met them because they told me that they were mine. But other ones that I've met that are more hybrid focused, so a mixture of like Arcturian and human or gray and human, or yes, I can agree with that. I haven't had one, but you let me know. Let me know what that's like.
Yes, you want one.
Oh, I've never had one, so. But that's okay. One thing that I found was that when they allow you to give birth to these children, there's such a strong telepathic bond, the exchange between you and the baby right away, that the ETs seem to be observing it. They want to make sure that that child has a very strong auric connection. I do believe they do things like delayed cord clamping, and I don't remember ever delivering my placentas because quite often I will end up giving birth not reclined, but it's like in a squatting pose.
Yeah.
Seems to be the most common one they have us deliver in. And it can be very different because you'll go from squatting and the baby coming out, and it's quite often where they're catching it or I'm catching it. And then it's like the chair that they have, it seems to be able to shapeshift or remorph into being like this weird bean shape where it's like a semi-reclined, like medical bed chair that's very, very soft. That I'm now leaning back, partially holding this baby on my chest. And it's quite different than what people are expecting. It's not the same traumatizing experience like we have in hospitals here.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Well, that is good, especially if you're doing it quite often.
Well, I've got 70 something from what I'm aware of.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Yeah. Lots of babies.
Your poor uterus.
Well, not a lot of work. So we're good to go.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Excalibur, so this is back to what we were talking about before, but I do like this comment. A large percent of the greatest physicists throughout history, like Isaac Newton, spent more time with alchemy and magic than their physics research. That is absolutely true.
I fully agree with that. I mean, if you look at it, a lot of people will look at the aspect of magic and they'll think of it being very separate from what the ETs are doing. But the ETs are very much so focused on the components of, like, they are very obsessed with things like the Fibonacci sequence and the components of the basic elements of life. Like, one of the reasons I got this tattoo, which you probably can't see well because I'm showing it horribly.
Oh, is that the chakras? Is that what that is?
No, the platonic solids, because what I've noticed with the ETs is they seem very focused on the building blocks of life as far as like how things are on, like, from the microcosm to the macrocosm, and how they're very interconnected. They seem to be very focused on that aspect as well, like how the science and the spirituality play together. It's so cool. I love it.
I do too. I do too. I'm gonna have to get back in touch with the Mantis being so I can figure out that science magic combination.
Well, you can also ask them for any of the beings who work with you in any lifetime that specialize in the magic and the science component to come forward to help you now.
Yeah, absolutely. Angel says, when you're pregnant, ET baby, how many month gestation do you experience?
It depends. With some of the races, I will have my normal period starting at like, let's say I'm starting at day 1. Sometimes they'll come pick it up at 5 or 6 weeks. Sometimes they'll come pick it up at 8 weeks. Sometimes they will end up taking me out of phase from this planet, and I will be gone for several months and then brought back to right around the time that they took me and did the fertilization. So it tends to be a little bit frustrating because it should be ovulating. I'll be like, okay, day 2 of my ovulation, perfect, like 16 days into my cycle type thing. Then all of a sudden I'll be like, why am I suddenly having an extremely intense menstrual cycle? And I'll ask my guys, like, he just got put back from hybridization after having another round of having babies. Like, come on. So some do appear to take months. Some can be done in a matter of weeks, and they'll take them and transfer them into those amniotic sacs like we talked about. Because in one of my Mantis experiences, I was laying on a bed and I had a being beside me who was masquerading as my husband. Thank you. And anyways, there was a mantis being in the corner, and this mantis was projecting this cloaked energy around it where it appears to be like kind of diffused where you kind of can't see it. And what happened was the mantis was doing what's known as a form of psychic surgery, where it actually opened up the belly of my uterus and my abdominal muscles, and the baby floated up out of my body in its entire form, and uterus, like outside of my uterus, was cut open, and the amniotic sac part of me was there, and I could see this little developing ET baby. I said, okay, you're this many days long, we'll come back and see you in this many more. And then it floated the baby in its amniotic sac back into my body, into my uterus, and sewed everything back up. I had really bad abdominal cramps after that for a few days. Like, it hurt like you wouldn't believe. But the one thing I found after experiences like that is that they do seem to have a lot of compassion and care for the hybrid children that they're making. And so when we talked about being allowed to remember these experiences, I've also shown a lot of compassion towards the beings when they're having stuff like this with me. I have expressed the appreciation for them. I'm excited to see my hybrids. That's part of the reason I'm allowed to remember these things is I've approached it differently from a young age than a lot of people have. I don't have the same fear with them.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Oh, my goodness. Well, we have been talking this is my longest show ever. 3 hours. No, I love it. I love it. And everybody else is loving it as well. So, but yeah, let's, I think we definitely, everybody, I'm loving the comments that I'm reading about it, which is great. But thank you so much, Samantha. Like, you have been amazing and wonderful. And ufologists said it perfectly. Mind blown. Absolutely.
Well, I hope you like my book that's coming out. I hope in the next year. It's so ridiculously long at this point. It's not even funny. I might break up in a book 1 and book 2 at this point.
Oh my goodness. Now, is this book based on your experiences?
Yeah, it's all just diary form entries of my experiences. It's none of my personal opinion, really. It's just to help everyone else get their opinion about what the contactee goes through from birth all the way through to approaching middle age. I don't know. At what age should we reach middle age?
Oh my gosh. I can't wait to read that. That's going to be amazing.
Thank you, sweetheart.
Oh, well, don't go anywhere because I have a question for you. But let me end this because otherwise I could talk to you all night long. So don't go anywhere.
I will not go anywhere.
Okay. All right. So we've got Mr. Ron Bumblefoot Thal rocking in the background with Women Rule the World. Bumblefoot is the official music of Spaced Out Radio, rocking us in and out of every single show. So come on, my little demons, and dance it up for the guitar god himself. A special thanks to everyone listening in at home, in your cars, with your coven, or wherever you may be. Thanks to everyone participating in our chat rooms on YouTube, Twitch, and on Twitter at #SpacedOutRadio. Remember, this show is copyright by Spaced Out Radio and SOR Media Ventures Limited. Thanks for sharing your evening with us. Mr. Bumblefoot, we need you to send us off into the night. And even though the broomstick may have landed for the night, remember, there's always a seat for you on the next flight. Good night, and go make some mischief, my friends.
We launch 1,000 ships into the rocks, and from the cliffs they watch us sink down in our thorny crowns. Beggars dressed as emperors, offering you 7 wonders, promising the deepest thunder. We'll tell you you're the perfect girl. We'll crawl for miles through the sand to win your hand and be your man. I try to act so cool, but you know I'm just a fool for you. For you. I will stop till I reach the top just to be there with you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. You guys have been amazing. And I will see you all tomorrow night with Science Bob. I am looking forward to it. Have a great night, everyone.